All right. We are live. So, welcome to the reaction stream for day two, the 2025 NFL draft. Where we are live for every pick of day two. We're already 2 picks behind. I'm hoping to have a few guests on this stream. Let me just send out the invite now, actually, to get those guys out here. All right. I actually want to pull up the draft so we can have it following along live with us here. Sam Teets is in the chat. Let's go. Congrats, Sam, on your top 15 placement in the Huddle Report. Saw that. I unfortunately placed rather lowly. We got Jim. Here we go. We got Jim. We got Sam Teets. Now we got a whole show going.
There we go. How you doing, Owen?
I've been better, but this is going to be my flu game here. I'm going to do my Jordan flu game. Last night during the first round of the draft, like halfway through, I spiked a massive fever and was just struggling to get through it. So I've been fighting it all day, and right before the draft, I ended up catching a little bit of disease to try to make it through the rest of the night. So we're gonna fight through this stuff here.
So what did you think of the Hairston pick? You had a round 1-2 on him, right?
Yeah, I had a high 2 on him. I've had a lot of time to sit on it because we talked about it a little before the pick. We were talking about potential possibilities for the Bills to take a guy there, and then when I took him initially, it was balance of the disappointment between Will Johnson still being there and me being as high on him as I am, and as well as Trey Amos, 2 guys who I have graded higher than Hairston, who I really liked for the Bills. But then once I got past that, understanding that there's probably something, especially with medicals with Johnson, I don't understand, and with Trey Amos, probably something more so ceiling wise or whatever the ways the Bills see that. I kind of try to push that context out and just look at the player itself. I'm actually really happy with it. I think if I was he was one of the players that I was gonna pick someone to fit schematically with them, he would have been it. As well as he brings a certain level of ceiling with how much athleticism he does have. That they're just kind of lacking, or the top end stuff they're lacking in their pass coverage. I do think apparently he's up to 190 something now. I don't know how much I believe that. He said it in his press conference. I think he was playing close to 170 his senior year in college there. So I don't know how he was just able to slap 20 pounds on. I don't know if it's something that he was doing in draft prep. But I mean, he was up to 180 something at the combine, so I'm sure the jump from 180, mid 180s to 190 plus, is not as great as what he was playing at his playing weight during his senior year of Kentucky there. I'm curious to see how long Will Johnson lasts now, because the question was apparently, so I was reading some stuff today about his medicals, about how the question around that was he had the turf toe injury, which I think me and most people think he just kind of took that and used it as a reason to opt out of the season pretty much. He didn't really have much else to prove tape-wise before the injury. So not trying to play through that and have him not putting the best ball on there because he's physically limited. Pick 36, we have Quinshon Judkins, Ohio State to Cleveland. going with their first pick of the day in Carson Schwarzenegger. So they doubled that right in the top 4 picks. Oh, that's a good one. But just to wrap up on Will Johnson, there was the hamstring that kept him out of the combine in his pro day, and then apparently now there's a knee injury that popped up, a new one. So there's some worry that 3 consecutive leg injuries in a 6-month span. You're a little worried about how that's going to be when it comes to his long-term health. Short term, when's he going to be able to play for you? How significant is the injury? Which is obviously something we probably weren't really privy to in the process leading up to this. I don't think anybody didn't have Will Johnson going first.
So similar to how you opened that segment, I'm curious, when you have medical red flags, when does the red flag get worthy of using draft capital? Because if I'm a team like Buffalo, and if he's still there at 56, and you can shelve him on IR, if you're a team picking where Buffalo is, or if you're a perennial playoff team, you don't get the chance to draft a Will Johnson. So in the off chance that the injury heals, you'd want him on your team. But I don't know if I'm Buffalo, if I've spent.
I was wondering that.
Go ahead.
I was curious about, because he's such a good player, tape wise for me, that am I willing to double dip so early with your first 2 picks on a spot where you've signed Dane Jackson, you've signed Trey White, so you have guys there that in my mind, with what they're going to do with Hairston, would be a platoon similar to what Kansas City did last year with their corner spot opposite Trent McDuffie, where they had undrafted dudes, the Jalen Watson and some other players that were just kind of rotating in and just doing whoever the hot hand was, doing a serviceable enough job. That's who they had playing there. They could see that happening for the Bills, whoever they think is playing the best that week, or maybe playing matchups until Harrison fully takes over and grasps that starting job. I could see that working out. So you already have 3 dudes for CB2 right now. Do you want to take a risk in drafting Will Johnson, a second corner, with one of your next 2 picks, the last 2 you have in the top 100? Or is that something where you hope he lasts to the 4th round? I doubt that ever happens.
Did the Dolphins trade up?
They did. Let's see what we're getting the details in right now, because they were not picking.
So they need a corner. They need an offensive lineman. So is this Savanea? Is this Ursary?
It could be. This could be the Will Johnson pick, because they did need a corner, and Will Johnson was my prediction for them at 13. They can get him in the 2nd round, would be a massive steal.
Xavier Watts.
So they must believe that Kader Kobe.
I'm guessing that wasn't that was me guessing.
Oh, your guess is Xavier Watts. I'm gonna guess. Oh boy, I want to see Will Johnson, but we just got done talking about his injury, so they're gonna want an impact player. They probably won't go with him.
So Xavier Watts and Emin Warrior both on the board. Which safety do you think fits Miami better?
Well, no, Emin Warrior just went to the Seahawks at 35.
Did he? Okay, I didn't see that. I'm sorry.
Yeah. So just a recap of the picks we've had so far, and our trade details are in for the Dolphins trade. Dolphins give up 37 and 143. Or I'm sorry, they give up 48, 98, and 135. They get 37 and 143. So they basically gave up a 3rd round pick to move up 11 spots in the 2nd round, and to move up from the top half of the 5th to the bottom half of the 4th. So while we wait for the there it is. I hate that. As a Bills fan, their top 2 picks are good to the point where I hate that for us. I don't know if schematically they're going to change much now, because they're going with players that they're good athletes. Don't get me wrong, but that's not their calling card. The calling card is just ass kicking power and being able to manhandle it off the line of scrimmage. So is that going to be? Are they going to move away from the heavy speed based game? I don't know if who's their starting running back right now? Is it still Achane, or did they bring somebody else in to complement him?
I don't know. I could go check a Miami depth chart if you want me to.
I think I can pull it up right here.
Okay.
Well, yeah. So to recap the picks we've missed so far in the second round, top pick was number 33 was Carson Schwarzenegger to the Browns, linebacker to UCLA. Then it was Jaden Higgins, wide receiver from Iowa State, to the Houston Texans at 34. Nicky Manwari, the safety out of South Carolina, to the Seahawks. Then Quinshon Judkins, the running back out of Ohio State, to Cleveland. And then now Jonas Avenue to the Miami Dolphins with another trade up. So that of those top 5 picks in the second round, all but one was a pick that was traded. Right? Because the Seahawks weren't on the board there. The Browns got that pick from their trade with Jacksonville. The Texans got that pick from their trade with the Giants. And the Dolphins just traded up with the Raiders.
Yeah, so do you think this pick for New England is a wide receiver, an offensive lineman, or a different position?
I think that depends on how we're going to get with this pick. We're going to get a real good sense of how they view Will Campbell and what position they think he's going to be. Because one of my favorite picks to mock at the top of the second round to them was Ozzie Trapilo, Boston player, staying at Boston, playing left tackle, which is the position they need. So they double down on offensive line. They take more of a traditional tackle type. You could see them going this and then, or going that there, and that spells out they think Will Campbell's going to be a guard for them. They could go wide receiver. Oh, we got Sam Teets on the stage now. What's up, Sam?
Hey, everyone, what's going on?
We're right now we're pontificating on this Patriots pick and what they're going to be going with.
All right, that'll be an interesting one. It feels like they have fewer needs than I thought they would, going like fewer dire needs, but they do have a lot of spots where the depth is not great, or they have replacement level starters. I'd be curious if they don't find like a pass catcher. I almost like maybe Elijah Arroyo to some extent from Miami could be an option.
Mm-hmm. Do you like
I was
Taylor
thinking
or Arroyo this high?
I prefer Arroyo personally, I think. Because to me, Mason Taylor's not really a good blocker. And I know he's got more bulk to him than Elijah Arroyo, but if the difference is blocking capabilities, they're really not they're not separated by a lot. And so I'd rather have the individual with the better route running and separation skills, and Arroyo has a lot more twitch than Mason Taylor. Mason Taylor has to rely a lot on contested catch situations and match it with DBs. Arroyo can actually just shake those players off him. So I prefer Arroyo of the two.
That was one of my most frustrating watches, was watching Taylor and knowing his size. And like you could see there was effort there, but like the blocking just never came together. And it's like this guy who has the size, who has the effort, who has the want, just can't land it and can't sustain blocks. And it was just really upsetting. So I'm like, you could be like an all-around player. That it was just frustrating to me to consistently watch that in and out. So yeah, I do think Arroyo is a better receiver right now than Taylor is. And if you're looking at run blocking or just blocking in general to separate the two of them, I don't think Taylor does it significantly better than Arroyo does. And Arroyo is like known because he's supposed to be like more of those receiving type tight ends where you're not expecting him to come in and be a big effect on the line with blocking. Also, Jim, I just checked the Miami Dolphins depth chart, and the depth chart, they did bring in Alexander Madison as a third string running back, but they also have Jalen Wright. So I'm not sure if they're planning on developing, if that's going to be their punch for when it comes to their power running system. Because like I said, Savanaia, he's going to be a player that you're going to want to run some more gap stuff. I don't think he's a bad athlete per se, but especially if Achane's lead back, you'd think that'd be a lot more spread, speed-based running where you're trying to get your blockers out into the boundary and get them in space. But I don't know if that maybe that's dictating whether or not they're going to be shifting more towards some more strong alignments, or if they're going to be, if Achane's not going to be the unquestioned first back, if Jalen Wright maybe takes that spot because he's got a little bit more oomph behind his pads. So we'll have to see about that. Maybe they go another back in this draft.
I think this is a draft where nearly every team could draft a running back, but it's going to be like round 6 and 7 when you're drafting them, right? Because like they used they traded up, I think, to get Wright last year. It
Yeah.
wasn't just a pick. They gave up a draft pick this year to go get Wright last year. If I remember that deal correctly.
There is a wonder for me because like I didn't realize that Dylan Sampson was 200 pounds when he ran his 4.4. Then maybe that's somebody that can like bridge the gap between those two types of players where they has some speed and juice, but isn't sacrificing as much size. And they maybe would want to bring that in to kind of bridge the gap between Wright and Achane. But they do like Wright, obviously, and he started to get some more play for them down the stretch at the end of the year last year. So that could be something where maybe we're reading too much into it and they're satisfied with what they got and they just think 7A can run more of that speed-based stuff. But at the same time, I'm not sure. And then with Kenneth Grant, I doubt Kenneth Grant changes a lot of what they're going to want to do defensively. I think they just feel like he fits with them better.
So there's probably going to be a few running backs that go here. Sam, where do you think Dylan Sampson ends up today?
Yeah, he's a curious one. I don't think I had him in my final top 100, my big board. I was close because there's a couple of running backs. Let me pull it up right now. There are a couple of running backs to me that are really closely clustered together towards this back end of the third round. I do view him more as one of these second half of the third round type running backs. I don't think he is a top 2 round guy. Partially because he does have some contact balance for a smaller player, but he benefits a lot from that Tennessee offense and how spread out they make the defense. He doesn't run into a lot of heavy boxes. And while his speed is really good, I don't think his speed is on the same level as like a Henderson. So looking at where I had him today, I actually had Dylan Sampson at 90. So I had him in the very final 10 spots here. The players who I think are in consideration for those like final 15, 20 spots where I could see running backs go, guys like Michelle Tootin from Virginia Tech, Dylan Sampson, and Trevor Etienne, maybe even Damian Martinez from Miami. He's probably an outlier. Those are 3 guys that are much smaller, much quicker backs. Martinez more of the traditional workload type player. But I view them more as like round 3 kind of guys, second half of round 3 type players.
So we have that running backs kind of starting now with Judkins going 2 picks before his Ohio State teammate and Henderson. So now we have 4 backs gone. What do we think this means for the Patriots and how they're liking with their current running back situation? I know, I believe I'm blanking. Ramondre Stevenson is on.
Stevenson still under contract.
I think he's his last year's deal.
Spring, right?
Did they?
I believe so. Because I think I was mocking them a running back at one point. A friend of mine texted me that, hey, just so you know, maybe not the. Let me look real quickly. Yeah.
4 years, $36 million.
Yeah.
Huh. And they just dropped the 30th overall pick on another back.
And they just spent a 2nd round pick on Henderson.
Was Stevenson up after this year, or was that a tack down to the last year of his contract? Because then if that's the case, they'll have both of them up as contracts towards the end of both their deals, or they're on the same timeline. But if not, that means Stevenson's under contract for a year longer than Henderson, so maybe he's the one who outlasts him? I doubt it. So
Stevenson was on this is the final year of his contract was this year. This was his 4th year in the NFL.
Yeah, so it's technically his 5 years left with the Patriots, concluding this upcoming season, whereas Henderson would only have 4, right?
No, Ramondre just finished his 4th. So this is the final, his rookie contract expired, I believe. So.
Oh, okay, yeah. So these two are on the same timeline then. They're both going to be up after the 4 years.
Yeah, I wouldn't be shocked, honestly, if they opt out of Stevenson's contract probably in like 2 years or so, considering those players tend to wear down a little bit more with the style he runs with. But this is really like you're building a multifaceted backfield here. Like Trevor Henderson's probably similar to Antonio Gibson of the running backs in this room. But honestly, after like our strong rookie season, Antonio Gibson has not really warranted anything kind of action as a running back. So you're seeing Stevenson be more of the power back, give you a bit of a heavier workload. Henderson's going to be your slasher, more dynamic player. And they're building out an offensive supporting cast here. I'm starting to like a little bit more, especially like the Diggs, if he can be healthy. I still think they need our pass catcher, though. Like they don't have enough needle movers among their tight ends and receivers to really make me feel comfortable with what Drake May is working with here going into year 2.
Yeah, I was going to say, I feel like for me, I probably would have taken a receiver here over a second running back, especially with how we view the running back class this year and how the wide receiver class outside of Jaden Higgins was taken, sure, but you still had Luther Burden. You have some other guys that we've been kind of projecting around at top of the second. Elik Ayumaner, I know Bill would love that one. There's a ton of guys here that were available that I don't know if when you're coming back around the top of the third, those same crop of guys would be around. Whereas, like, you already have an established running back in Stevenson. Sure, you need someone who can complement him and eventually take over the reins once you end up moving off that contract. But I don't know if I like the investment to where your biggest needs are on an offense. Like, I think Diggs can come back and be fine for them. I'm not saying he's cooked by any means, but for a team that needs more weapons overall on the outside, adding another running back where he's going to be splitting carries regardless with Stevenson, whereas a receiver has the opportunity to come in, and with Diggs recovering from the injury and the lack of real competition right now, based on what we saw from the rookies last year they brought in, there's more of a clean opportunity for someone to get snaps and make an impact on this team at wide receiver than running back.
I do think there will be some value at the turn, though, if I had to bet at a receiver. Because right now, looking at the way my board stacks up, if you're talking about best available receivers, you got Luther Burden, Jalen Noel. Both these guys are slot receivers, basically. And I don't think they really feel like they need one of those. They're probably looking more for a traditional X-type receiver. Someone's going to play on the outside, XC, one of those guys. The best available picks in that area would have been someone like Iomanor or Trey Harris from Ole Miss, and frankly, the NFL just doesn't value those type of players in this range right now.
So that's fair.
This
yeah,
Bears
so I think you're probably looking at those guys are going more towards the early 50s or mid 50s of this draft, probably, and then you might have at the turn or in the third round, Jalen Royals, Torrey Horton, Kyle Williams might be there. There's Jack Bech will probably be somewhere in that range. There will be some options, but as a whole, this wide receiver class really isn't good once you got past that first tier of guys on day one.
Yeah. So Luther Burden to the Bears here at pick 39. With what we know, with what we have with the current wide receiver crop, so there's DJ Moore, you have Rome Odunze was a first round pick last year. How do we feel like that comes in? Is this Ben Johnson's version of the Amon-Ra St. Brown role for the Bears offense? Because I felt like DJ Moore being more of that gimmick touch guy. Well, he does play on the outside. I don't know. I always kept projecting that to be more of the Amon-Ra role in this offense. But now they bring in Burden, who's similar with run after the catch and high athleticism, but needs to refine his route running more often. It's kind of a similar player to Moore. How do we feel about that fit with the Bears and what they currently have and what Ben Johnson's going to deploy?
So I think you're onto something with look at how Ben Johnson wants to build his offense. Because round one, they did Loveland. Then they come around and turn around and do Burden. This is not a mock draft that I've seen for the Bears. I don't know that I've seen tight end wide receiver as the pick combinations for Chicago. Clearly, the coach is getting his guys. Like, I don't know.
What were the popular mock spots for them? Like, it was like D-line, offensive line before they started making additions for agency. What other things were getting popularly mocked to the Bears?
Safety with a possibility. I'm blanking on his name now, but the Penn State safety they took a couple of years ago having multiple concussions and potentially at a stage of his career where he had another Jaquan Brisker, if he had another significant head injury, he might be in a retirement stage situation. So I think that this pick right here, you occasionally saw someone like Xavier Watts going here in mocks.
And then defensive tackle. So when I was podcasting with some Bears content creators, they were definitely looking at edge rusher and defensive tackle, in addition to possibly a boundary corner. But clearly, Ben Johnson is building an offense that he likes. And there was ESPN just flashed a graphic that Jameson Williams and Luther Burden went to high school together.
Fun fact, you know that Trey Harris, the Ole Miss receiver, was quarterback at his high school, and the top receiver at his high school was Malik Neighbors.
So Trey Harris was throwing balls to Malik Neighbors?
In high school.
Oh.
Yep.
Giants should have drafted him and put him at quarterback then. They already got the chemistry there. So with what you're talking with Brisker and some of the run on safeties that we're predicting, especially because the safety is another one where you see a lot of guys. There's a top of the market for this draft, and then there's kind of more of a pick your taste or pick your poison once you get further past those tiers. Do you think that 41 here, predictively, the Bears are going to go safety then, or do you think there's somewhere else they might want to lean towards, or do they go third offense in a row?
I think we're about to get a Saints pick here. That's gonna be surprising. I think this might be the quarterback they eventually get here. But yeah, for the Bears, I mean, I'm looking at like the edge class right now. There's a ton of edge rushers available. And there's some good defensive tackles too. I think if you're the Bears right now, and I know that you have the ability to really reshape your offense here entirely if you want to, but I think that right now the value at the defensive side of the ball is just crazy. Like you can get, I think as Rock is still on the board, Squirton's still on the board. There's Alexander still on the board. There's a lot of talented players here that you can go ahead and take a swing at. And we're reaching like almost the midpoint of the second round. That's a great value pickup for you. And you fix the offense almost entirely. The only question mark is going to be Braxton Jones at left tackle. And frankly, he's a league average player. If he was a friend of mine phrased it this way: if Braxton Jones has been a first round pick, we'd be saying he'll probably get a second contract, but he's like a league average tackle. The fact that he was a late round pick means people are constantly trying to replace him. But I don't think that really matches where they'll end up going.
Pick 40's in and is a quarterback. Tyler Shough out of Louisville is this third quarterback off the board.
I think I was messaging when Jim had a live stream going earlier. What I had heard was that if the Saints were going to come up and trade back into the first round last night to have a second first-round pick, it was going to be for Tyler Shough. That's what I had heard. They have liked him throughout the course of the process. This has been their guy. I thought originally maybe Jalen Miller would be the guy since he got invited to the draft itself. Everyone was kind of hyping up late in the process, but he was not a priority for the Saints. They've been kind of zeroed in on Shough as their option.
I felt like, so with a lot of these teams that ended up trading back out, like, so with the Giants and the Browns specifically, you had teams that were, they made additions in the offseason where they are filling up that quarterback room with veterans, whether it's Kenny Pickett and the Flacco for the Browns, and then with the Giants, it was Jameis and Russ. Especially for the Browns now, they went and they added more picks to be able to, you would think, maneuver next year's draft class to be able to go up and get a quarterback in the class we anticipate being better than the current class, that Cleveland wouldn't be a quarterback spot, that the Giants already grabbed their guy, and the Saints was the only spot I could really see where it was like, now that was where like the Shedeur spot was going to be for me, and I didn't really even love that just because I used to, you have second-year guy in Rattler who, if you're going to go in and try to get a guy next year, this team itself as general is not great. You might as well see what you have in him as a potential future backup or a trade piece if he performs better than you expect, despite having a limited cast, and then use that, get some extra pieces or whatever. But I thought this would have to be like the only possible like quarterback spot, and the fact that it's Shough over Shedeur, I don't know how long we wait until we see Shedeur now.
I don't think Shedeur's name gets called today. If he hasn't been picked, what the next team that would pick him is Pittsburgh, and that's round 3.
So the Bills just traded up to 41.
Defensive tackle or Landon Jackson.
Or Nick Scorton. So with the Bills, the reporting has been Landon Jackson has said in the process that he has not talked to a single team more than he's talked to the Buffalo Bills. That's been the team he's been in conversation with basically daily. And with Nick Scorton, or that was what it was. Landon Jackson said he's been in conversation with the Bills daily, and he's done the most visits with them. Nick Scorton said between I think it was the Bills and the Eagles were the two teams that were communicating with him the most in the pre-draft process. So those are two of the edge rushers I could see going here. They already took their corner, so is this going to be D-tackle? Are they moving up for a wide receiver they specifically like? I'm curious to see where they go here.
So, Owen, I know that you have Darius Alexander high enough to take here. Sam, is there a defensive tackle that you like at 41 overall?
Looking through my board right now, I don't think there's one that I would love here. Maybe TJ Sanders, but he's not really what you need for Buffalo. You have a guy like that already. You need someone who's maybe a little bit stronger, can give you a little bit more in the run game. It's maybe a bit more of a physical outlier. I have Darius Alexander 53 on my board, so that wouldn't make this a significant reach. Like this is within range, in my opinion, for that type of player. I also have JTT from Ohio State and Landon Jackson right there in that similar range as well. Between 51 and 57 on my board, I have got Tuimoloau, Jackson, Alexander, and Nick Scorton all in that range. I think those guys are all possibilities based on the profile that the Bills typically look at. If you want the most explosive one of those players to me, I think that's probably Landon Jackson. If you want the one with the highest floor, which I know we talk about Buffalo's more of a ceiling drafting team, but the highest floor is probably JTT, just based on like what he's able to do in the running game and also just the moves that he has developed. Ceiling wise, you're probably looking at Nick Scorton if you're trying to take the best available player on the defensive line in that case.
I'm convinced it's Scourton, but Owen, what do you think?
Well, so the trade details just came in. The Bills basically moved up from 52 to 41 by moving down 10 picks from 62 in the second round to 72 in the third round. And then they swapped a fourth for a seventh this year. So the Bears moved up from the seventh to the fourth. In exchange, they were able to move up 10 spots from the third to the back half of the second, and then giving up these spots here. For me, and Sam, I'd like to hear your sell job here, because for me, I love Alexander. He was like in my top 32 easily for me, players-wise. And then Landon Jackson and Nick Scorton are both guys who were also knocking on the door of my top 32. I think Scorton was in it. Landon Jackson was pretty high up there as well. For me, though, JTT was the one that I just didn't really get when it came to the full package. I understand, because he had a high floor, he had a good run defender. He has decent athleticism for size. He's got good length, heavy hands, can play the run. I just didn't really see it as like an upsided pass rusher. Do you have any way you can sell me more if that's going to be the pick here?
Yeah, but one second. I want to throw one name out here just in case this guy pops up. Femi Oladejo from
Please,
UCLA.
I would love it. I want it so bad.
Just because, if we're talking about ceiling, might be that guy. He's played edge rusher for like 6 months.
I want him so bad.
So that was the name I'll throw out there as maybe like a dark horse pick here. But for JTT, I think just watching the whole Ohio State defensive line, I watched in the course of the entire season. To me, JTT is the most consistent contributor there as a pass rusher. He's better than Jack Sawyer. He's got more. He doesn't have a lot of bend, but he's able to win around the edge more often. He's got more natural power to him. And the pass rush plan with the hand usage is much more developed. The hand placement, too, in terms of loading and striking, where he's placing it on tackles is better. He's got a really developed spin move. He's got some counters worked in. And he's got a little bit more twitchy hand usage you get from a player like Jack Sawyer. Obviously, Tyler Williams was a first-round pick, doesn't offer very much as a pass rusher. I think when you're looking at the whole and that entirety of that defense, the player that I walked away feeling most impressed with, who's draft eligible this year, was Tuimoloau. And I can't say that from the past. Like last year, when he was draft eligible, I had like a late third-round grade on him. And this year, I have more like a borderline top 50 mark on him. So I've moved up a lot on him based on his development over the past year and a half.
Yeah, I was surprised by how. I don't know if I want to say it like this, but how
the pick's in.
Yeah, we'll get to that. Just to finish my last like
okay.
The pass rush stuff.
The player I said you couldn't possibly take, because you already have one of those.
So, that's interesting.
I love the player. I'm just concerned about the fit, because you have Ed Oliver already. And Sanders is a different build than Ed Oliver, but they're both guys who are not run defense first type players. And I think Sanders has some run defense capability. Go back and watch his 2023 Georgia tape, and he was an excellent job in run defense in that game. But I'm asking you to go back and watch 2023 tape in order to point to that. You know what I mean? He's a super explosive athletic guy who can convert speed to power, who can move all across the defensive line. But again, you're primarily looking at guys a little bit underdeveloped in terms of hand usage, and he's primarily focused as an explosive, penetrating 3-tech, which you kind of already have.
Yeah, I get it in the sense that if you wanted to have him be the primary rotating player behind Ed Oliver, that makes sense. Like you want to be able to be able to rotate those guys. They do have a heavy rotation in Buffalo that's not unfamiliar. And Ed Oliver was at times the only player in that D tackle room that was doing anything for the team last year. So I could see them wanting to add another person so that way when he has to come off the field, they're not losing anything when it comes to that role. for me, this screams that Dwayne Carter is their plan at One Tech moving forward.
Yeah,
Yeah,
that's
Brandon Bean was asked about this following round one, or maybe a couple days before. I heard it recently, though, was what the idea was for One Tech and if they had any idea of Dwayne Carter could be that player for them. And we've talked about how Dwayne Carter is more this like another guy who's like a penetration style D tackle, get up the field. He's at 305 though, and a lot of the conversation around the nose tackles in the draft class for the Bills was how they prefer having guys who are like 305, 310, and can still split gaps, and that's like their style of One Tech. It's not these 330-pound dudes like Kenneth Grant or Tyler Williams that can engage, disengage, and be kind of run cloggers. They like gap shooting players. So with this pick and TJ Sanders being another sub 300-pound D tackle, my guess is their future plans lie in Dwayne Carter being the One Tech and filling that role.
Could I ask a slightly different question? So if you look at the next 4 or 5 teams picking, do we think that TJ Sanders was going to those teams? Like I like the player, and I think a lot of the scouting reports came back as that he was a top 64 player, borderline top 50. And I'm just looking and I'm thinking, like, as long as you got in front of the Cardinals, you'd be okay.
Yeah, I don't think. I mean, the 49ers perhaps because they haven't their.
You're right.
Their interior is awful, but not the Jets. Like the Jets the Jets signed Derek Nandi in free agency this year. They had Quinn Williams obviously already. They had Leonard Taylor and Darian Mathis rolling over, and the guy they took just now as a player who was sometimes mocked in the first round. So the Jets were going to take this player no matter what. I think the Niners are the one they were probably worried about among the teams on the board.
Great point.
I can see that. The Cardinals I would have seen if they didn't take Walter Nolan last night. Rams, no. Colts, probably not. Cowboys, probably not. To be honest with you, it would just be they were just trying to jump the 49ers in anticipation. I mean, they still had a ton of picks before that, too, like we don't have in front of us at the moment. So I could see that they maybe just thought he wouldn't last, and there was a talent drop off from Sanders in their eyes to whoever was next. That's why they moved up and got him. But
yeah, can we talk about that talent drop off? Because actually, I think you just hit it. So if you remember when we were doing Epic Mock and we were in the war room and we were talking, there were basically 7 defensive tackles, 5 of which went round 1. Alfred Collins is still on the board. And then I would have had TJ Sanders in that same tier. So there's actually like a group of 8 defensive tackles. But then from Sanders to, like, I know that you're higher on Alexander, but from Sanders to the Joshua Farmer level, there's actually a pretty big drop based on how I heard the scouting reports as you guys were covering them. But like, Sam, do you see the drop in the defensive tackle group?
Yeah, I do. I see a pretty significant drop off. I mean, if you just wipe Darius Alexander off the board for me, the gap between TJ Sanders at 38 and the next best interior defensive lineman is in the 70s, and that was Alfred Collins with injury stuff and other things involved. It is a pretty significant gap. I will say that from what I've heard, NFL teams are higher on Josh Farmer than I think the media are, from my understanding. Like Philadelphia might take him at 64, potentially. So I think there's a gap there might be not as big in the minds of the media. Same with Shemar Turner, depending on how you view Shemar Turner. He's also a guy who could potentially go in this round as I don't even know what you would be playing him at because he was better off like playing like as a 4-tech last year than he was this year playing more interior role. But there are some players I think the league will fill in here that maybe we don't have in this general range. But for me personally, yes, I think there's a pretty significant gap between basically 40 on my board and 70. The only defensive tackle in the middle of that is Darius Alexander, which who the league I think is lower on than the media. I think the league views him more as like a mid-third type player.
Owen had to scout against Darius Alexander, so that's definitely one of his guys.
Yeah, I love Darius Alexander. Not only, I had to do it for game prep for UB against Toledo, but in addition, like for me, when I'm building my board, and I do it differently just for like when I have to do like the predictive mocks and stuff like that. In those ones I'll factor in outside influence like injuries and age and stuff like that. But like for me, when I'm building my board just for my own purposes, I'm doing it a lot on just tape grade. And for me, Darius Alexander was like had some of the best tape, and then it translated over to the Senior Bowl, the reps you saw there. So for me, I loved him, and I was relatively higher on Alfred Collins and who's the other D tackle I have left? I just pulled my board away. So Darius Alexander I think was the best and remaining D tackle available, and then I had Collins relatively high too. But then after that, I'm scrolling for a while here before I get to my next player, who's like late day 3 grade for me, or late day 3, late round 3 grade for me, who would be the next available D tackle after TJ Sanders.
Well, there's also like various different styles of play too. Like TJ Sanders can get you more of a pass rush opportunity than someone like Alfred Collins is. And Alfred Collins is not a bad pass rusher, but it's also not what he's known for. Like he's going to be much more effective as a run defender for you out of the gate, even though he is super versatile. And then you got like the other players who are, for me, in this third round range are primarily nose tackle type players. Guys like Jamari Caldwell from Oregon, Jordan Phillips from Maryland is a bit of probably like a shade technique. The other guy who I consider potentially being a top 100 player who's going to have some of that ability that TJ Sanders would give you is Omar Norman-Lott from Tennessee. He is super explosive. He's not one of these penetrating 3 techs, a little undersized. He's got medical flag, though. So he's not in my top 100. He's at like 103. He's a really good player, but he's more of a rotational guy at Tennessee. He was never a full-time starter. And, speaking of Alfred Collins, I think I just saw it pop up on your screen.
Yeah, there you go.
Yeah, so I think that gives us our answer, right? Like they were worried about the 49ers taking their guy, essentially. Because the 49ers were going to probably take interior defensive lineman.
Yeah, for me with Norman Lott, the fact that he was pulled out, like he was specifically like a pass rush specialist at the college level. Like I loved his pass rushing. He was probably one of, not my favorite interior pass rusher in this class, just on a down consistency basis. But for me, it was like when he was on the field for run defending, he just wasn't able to help at all. If he wasn't being active liability, he was kind of just being neutralized. And then also the fact that he was a player that wasn't even, sometimes would not even be on the field for snap. Like I would go through and look at his snaps on PFF Ultimate, and he's playing 20 snaps a game because 18 of them are pass rush snaps and 3 are run defense because they specifically deployed him in a certain way. And that alarmed me a little bit. So even like TJ Sanders, while I don't think he's a great run defender, I think he still is like, he's capable of playing it, at least even at the college level. Whereas Omar Norman-Lott was questioned about that from his college team in general. So like, that's where I get a little worried about with him. Like if you want that pass rush element, sure. And you have someone that's ahead of him that you can rotate with him and that'll work better. But TJ Sanders, I think, even though I don't think he's a good run defender actively, he's a more all-around player than.
Cover One did something on TJ Sanders where you can also move him around, right? Like they showed that he lined up at the 0, the 1, the 3, and I think 5. And I don't know if they moved him out wider, but Eric Turner did a brief Twitter write-up. I didn't see any of the podcasts on it, but do you guys see Sanders that same way where you could move him around?
I tend to. Let me pull my report real quick. I usually list where I see the players line up in my report. Let me see if I have it listed for here. Primarily sees snaps at 3 and 2 tech, but also sees minimal snaps at 1 and 0. So I don't have 5 tech listed on here, but I can say from just watching his athletic profile, you can probably play him like as a base defensive end for some snaps a game and get away with it and still get impact there as like rushing as like a 4 tech. So, yeah, I think he has the athletic profile to be that guy. The other one who has the profile to do some of that is Alfred Collins, who got picked here with the 49ers. So kind of to the point that we were making earlier where they felt like they jumped San Francisco. The difference between Collins and Sanders is that Sanders is more explosive and gets a little more bend to be able to create shorter angles for himself around offensive linemen versus Collins being more of a power profile player who gives you a little bit less as a pass rusher.
Yeah, the difference for me would be Alfred Collins is somebody who wins through length and heavy hands. Like, he's still a good athlete out of his stance. He's just not going to be the one. He's significantly larger than TJ Sanders, and you can see the athleticism reflect that. So with TJ, it was a lot more of, and I guess if you're looking at the two different players, he's much more of a Billsy defensive tackle because he's more of that up the field, explosive bend type of player. For me, though, with Alfred Collins, you don't have anybody on your roster right now that does that skill set. So unless you're entirely anticipating just heavy rotations and having a ton of gap shooters, even at one tech, that you're just having play hard gap shooting every single play and then letting your linebackers clean up and not having any kind of players who can stack and shed, then I don't know if, even though Alfred Collins isn't as much of a fit for the Bills than TJ Sanders is, I don't know what you would have done there.
Oh, I know the Cowboys picked. Cowboys did really good. So before we get to that, I want to talk about the Jets here for a second. Because obviously divisional rival of the Bills. I think they so far have knocked out of the park. I'm not a huge Mason Taylor guy, but a lot of people in the league like Mason Taylor. And if he turns into what they think he is, the Jets passing on Tyler Warren in the first round and going ahead and taking Armand Membu instead to complete that offensive line, and then getting their tight end anyways in round 2, to me, like, that's the way to do it. And also, it's a great value way of building your team because, frankly, a tackle just matters more value-wise, and you can replace some of those tight end reps more in the aggregate a little bit more than you can with a tackle. So to me, this is like an epic draft strategy by the Jets. It's a great way to start. I think this sets a really good foundation for the offense going forward because now you have your bookend tackles, because Fashana looked pretty good towards the end of last year. You now have tight end Mason Taylor. You now have really established a core group for your offense. And a lot of those offensive linemen are pretty young players.
So who's the Ohio State tight end that the Jets have right now who would be like their number 2 guy?
Theo Johnson was Penn State, wasn't he?
No, but he's with the Giants.
Wrong New York team. Thank you.
The one you're thinking about is Jeremy Ruckert.
Yeah, so we were talking about it earlier with Mason Taylor when we were talking about what maybe some of the picks that were going to be at the top of the second round are going to be. How Mason Taylor is a guy that'll bring you an element of passing to your tight end room, but you don't want to rely on him as a blocker in general. So for me, I think the fact that you have someone in place there in Ruckert that has played for you and can be more of that blocking type is better than if you had no one there and you're expecting Taylor to come in and be like an all-around tight end for you. So they have someone to complement that. Like you brought up, they have the bookend tackles. They have weapons on the offense with Garrett Wilson. And I don't think that they were really missing a ton when it comes to like filling out like starters-wise on the offense. I felt like they were just looking for complementary pieces. And with Mason Taylor being that receiving part of the offense for the Jets, it could be similar to a situation we saw with because with the Lions and Sam Laporta and how they used him more as like a move receiver, but still having size out there and having a number 2 tight end stay in and be able to run the ball. So there could be potential that's what they're moving more towards, and that they aren't valuing adding receiving talent outside of what they already have and then just stocking up on more of the run game type. I wouldn't be surprised if they took another running back here just to pair with Braylon Allen and Breece Hall, especially if the rumors about Breece Hall being moved is true. So I could see this being like the reflective of that Lions history and pedigree that they're bringing in with their new head coach. Do we want to talk about? So we touched on Alfred Collins a little bit. Let's touch on Izaraku here with the Cowboys. Another player similar to Femi Oladejo, and even then, and this is not a comp in any way, shape, or form, but similar to what they had in Micah Parsons, where you had Izaraku and Oladejo, who were these guys who would have alignments where they were stacked linebackers, but primarily, especially with Oladejo later on in the season, more just edge rush type players to really move them around and be more of these defensive chess pieces. You think you consider them more edges, especially like Izaraku. But how do you think they're going to balance that between having a guy with Parsons and a guy with Izaraku, who my biggest concern with him was his ability to be a consistent player on the line of scrimmage and be able to hold up against the run game and stack and shed. I think he has the pass rush profile and the quickness and athleticism to impact a game. It was just more so, where was he going to find a consistent spot And with him and Micah on the same defense, is there going to be a way that they can make that balance work? Or is there going to be something with them having to pull one off the field or the other? I'm not sure how they're going to make that work with Micah on the team already.
They're going to line up Jack Sanborn, DeMar Overstrom, and Maris Leofeld behind them and tell those guys to be heat-seeking missiles. And that's how they're going to get away with it. They're going to play downhill at the linebacker level, I think. And they're going to have a lot of rotational bodies to do it with. But looking at the defensive front, I know it is a little bit lighter overall, but you also have Dante Fowler who's coming off of a great year. You have Sam Williams is still in this room. You still have you have Marshall Nealon from last year was a second-round pick who's in this room. He's a pretty good edge setter. And you've got Peyton Turner's coming into this room, who was the former first-round pick. So you have a lot of recognizable names and talent here on the edge. Obviously, Dan Quinn's not here anymore. He used to like to rotate their guys quite a bit. I don't know what will happen now in terms of how the snaps will get split up. My guess is that a lot of these guys like Sam Williams and Marshall Nealon, who have shown potential, will probably be a bit of odd men out, with Parsons, Fowler, and Izaraku taking most of the snaps. They don't have a ton of size up front. They're really going to rely, I think, on that second level to make a lot of mistakes right, if I had to guess.
Yeah, that was kind of I like the fit because you have an archetype for your edge rushers there. Like I said, with a Micah style edge rusher that Izaraku can model his game after, and you can not worry about if Micah misses time or if he has to take a break for any reason whatsoever. You have a player who can fill that role on your defense more effectively. I just worry that. And now Micah is a much better run defender, I think, point of attack guy than Izaraku would, but he's not ideal. And having another guy out there that's not super ideal when it comes to point of attack, similar to he's not the next player that got drafted in JTT. Like that's not going to be who you're getting in Izaraku. And you're already having an undersized front. You drafted a big D tackle in Mozzie Smith last year that underwhelmed when it came to making an impact for you. You played around with his weight a ton. So your front is already kind of is a concern. And while I do think this adds talent to that front, I don't know if that's going to make it so that way it answers the questions you had coming into it.
I think they'll be fine. Honestly, I think they'll trade off some big runs if it means they get after the passer a lot more often. What they're really going to bank on here is the fact that Micah Parsons is going to draw more double teams as he gets into his prime more often. Think about what happened to T.J. Watt this past year. The amount of double teams he got, the amount of double teams Myles Garrett has gotten over the years. Micah Parsons is going to be entering that stratosphere here. I think they're really going to try to capitalize on that with how they set up their edge number 2, where that's Nealand, Fowler, who's done a really good job as like a DPR type player in the past, be really efficient that way. Or now it's Izaraku. They've got a ton of bodies to take care of that. And if they want to get more creative with their defensive linemen now, they can, because they can line up 3 outside linebackers in the field at a time now and play around with their defense front if they want to. And Nealon has some ability to reduce inside occasionally because Nealon is a bit of a bigger body, more like that 260, 270 range, I think, if I remember correctly, but I could be wrong about that. So you have more versatility on your defensive front now. And Izaraku is a player who can take coverage drops, and he does a really good job. Like, he moves like a linebacker, really does, in terms of like his hip fluidity, his change of directions, agilities. So he's not going to play off ball, but he can take some mugged up snaps in the A gap where he's blitzing from a 2-point stance over a guard or the center or something like that. So you can get some creative looks from that way.
Yeah, I can definitely see that. I'm sure they'll figure it out and they have a plan. That's why they would have taken him here. So I'm not questioning that. It's more so.
Dallas, I don't know if Dallas is the plan. I'll be honest with you. I don't really know about that one, but
you know what? That's fair. I don't. You know what? We should just anticipate that Dallas doesn't. And anything that happens is a happy accident. But especially with in the division that they're in, with like you have the Eagles being more of that run heavy team. That's like who you're targeting. That's who you're chasing. I'm surprised they didn't try to bulk up more. But again, like you said, if you can get after the passer, you're willing to take some home run hits, and you have guys who can stop the run at the second level to help with that. All right, so JTT goes to the Colts at 45. How do we feel like he fits in with their front? Because I know they've had a couple different guys there. Odiangwo, I think, is still there. You have Kwity Paye, some other edge rushers there that will be able to play with, but I'm not quite sure what the situation is down there. So if either of you guys want to chip in with how you think JTT fits.
So Dio's actually in Chicago now. That was one of their free agent signings. He's the
Okay.
defensive end opposite Montez Sweat. To me, this is just the Dio replacement to some extent. Maybe not as much of an athletic freak as Dio was, but certainly a more polished player. The rotation there will be very interesting because we know Kwity Paye, who's on a second contract, is going to get snaps. We know Latu, who was his first round pick last year, is getting snaps. We would assume JTT has to get snaps because otherwise, why would you take him this high in the draft? And you have Samson Ebukam, who's also been a proven pass rusher there as well. So I think we're seeing some of these defensive line rooms taking a much steeper trend towards rotating their guys up front. It is a bit of a curious pick. I don't think you really needed it. It's a good value. I mean, it's a Colts type player. Like this fits their scheme. It fits their type of player they like to pursue. But it is not maybe the biggest need I would have had down for their team. Unless, of course, they feel very comfortable with where the offensive line is. They took Matt Gonzalez recently. They're probably playing him at right guard this year. Braden Smith had a bit of a bounce back here this past year. They drafted Tanner Bordellini recently. Hope stepping at center for Ryan Kelly. I don't know. This is tough for me because the Colts are very, very much a B-level team across the board. And taking JT means just you're drafting a rotational type player in the second round right now. He could be a star for other teams, but for the Colts, he'll probably just be rotating, I imagine.
So I was just scrolling up and looking at it. So with the start of TJ Sanders, and now we're getting another run of positions. I was gonna say we're getting a run of D linemen here. We're also getting a run on the tight end 2 tier with Terrence Ferguson of Oregon going to the Rams. He was one of those guys that was a draft like favorite coming out in the final few weeks before the draft. Like he was getting a lot of hype just from his athletic profile. I didn't actually get around to watching him before the draft got off. I didn't really focus tight ends all that much this year. So if I'm someone who's curious about this pick, I'm a Rams fan. Sell me on Terrence Ferguson as a fit for this team.
I'm curious if they wanted Mason Taylor and if this is like the rebound pick or not. It might not be, though, because I think Taylor's a little bit more heavy-footed. To me, Ferguson's a bit more creative with the ball in his hands. He's a little bit more of a free-flowing athlete. He's not the best in line, but he's certainly not far off of that same grouping with Mason Taylor and all those guys. He definitely puts effort in when he's in line. Apparently, a guy who operates and wins a lot on the slot. Really good straight line speed, good open field vision as well. Sets up his blockers well and makes sure he can contribute and maximize runs. I do think that he was schemed up a bunch of touches at Oregon. I preferred him more as like a third round type player than a second round player. But he is a very fluid mover. He's got a nice release package, good top speed, nice ability to beat press coverage or early contact in the route. And he can overtake some linebackers, really stress you up the seam. Very creative with the ball in his hand. You'll probably get some scheme touches short for him, but also work him downfield a little bit and at the intermediate level, especially if you get him in man coverage. I don't see the highest of ceiling here, really. Like I said, I probably would have preferred him in third round, but
So
I don't know. The Rams have been looking for tight end for a while.
So I have a question. So Sam, you mentioned scheme touches for Tyler Warren. That was on the podcast that we just had a little while ago. You mentioned scheme touches for Terrence Ferguson. So when you're scouting a player and you see that the offense has to scheme touches for them, is it positive because they're a good enough player, you want to get them the ball? Or from a projection standpoint, they won't be able to be schemed open in the NFL as much? Does it move them down? Like how do you interpret like scheme touches?
So it does depend on the position a little bit. If it's a receiver like Malachi Corley, where you're just getting scheme touches over and over again, that's a little bit worrying because receivers have to have a more developed out route tree. For tight ends, where the process of onboarding the NFL is a little bit slower, usually get a little bit more of a runway, and the NFL teams understand that in the process of taking tight ends, you don't have to have the best route tree coming in immediately. So you can be more of a scheme touch reliant player. Terrence Ferguson is not reliant on scheme touches, but he does benefit from them. Part of the reason why college programs turn to these, it's not always saying that these players need scheme touches. Sometimes it's the college offense is saying, hey, the easiest way to get our best playmakers the ball is to do this. It minimizes the chance we're going to screw up. And really all these college teams are trying to do is win, not necessarily develop the players for NFL potential. So it's not you have to figure out if it's the offense is the problem or if it's the player that's the problem in a lot of these cases. To me, at Oregon, Ferguson's a good enough player where he can win at all three levels you want him to. This is not a player who's going to be held back at the NFL level, I think, by route running or that kind of development. So in this case, it's not a big deal for me. In Tyler Warren's case, it's not a massive deal for me. It was actually probably a good thing for him because it showcased how he wins with the ball in his hands. But a lot of times it's based on how the offense is trying to create cheaper, easy offense and minimize risk in college. There are instances where it is the player's limitations that are causing it, but a lot of times it's just the way the offense is approached in college versus in the NFL.
Yeah, I think the fact that you see that as a positive for Tyler Warren in the overall coverage and as a negative for a guy like Luther Burden, it speaks to how, and specifically with positions, that it changes because Tyler Warren was able to, in the plays where he isn't getting gimmick touches, he's still winning and making plays, and you can see that happening. And them giving him touches, you're like, okay, this just shows us more of how much of an athlete he is, how much Penn State, a Big Ten program, is trusting him to be a dominant player. Whereas like Luther Burden, I think he's better outside of the gimmick touch game. That most people are a little too harsh on him, in my opinion. Like people were looking specifically at how he was getting the ball, and they're like, "Oh, well, it was just gimmicked all the time." It's like, yeah, but he was still winning before or outside of that role. So he got a little hurt too much on that. But for the same time, like if it was like Malachi Corley is a great example. I was not a big Malachi Corley guy because when he was asked to run routes that weren't gimmick touches, you saw he was way more limited when it came to route running and creating separation that way, despite having the physical profile he had and the athleticism he had. And where he was getting a ton of his production was on screens and on design touches in the short intermediate game to get him on the move. So at that point, you can look at that and say, okay, he's not winning when he's not getting those touches, and when he's winning when he does get those touches, that's where the concern comes. So the slide for Will Johnson stops here at pick 47. The Cardinals trade up to grab him. Now, the Cardinals have added two defensive players, now Walter Nolan and Will Johnson. Obviously, there's concerns about injuries. He had 3 lower body injuries in the past 6 months, 3 separate ones that kept him out for different reasons, between turf toe, hamstring, and now an unidentified knee injury. I think those are what the reporting is that's coming out. I heard some stuff today about how it's maybe something that happened in the past that wasn't properly cleaned up, and then that's what the issue is. I've heard other people say it's a brand new injury no one's heard about or seen about before recently. Sam, you might be able to chip in on that a little more because you might have some other sources there, but I think he's still a great player. Cardinals land a guy in the second round that could have been a top 10 player if he was clean bill of health. So with what they're doing and with Gannon's defense, I think complementing that offense that already has some proven playmakers, Cardinals might be a sneaky team in that NFC West this year. Yeah,
concerns with the more shadowy lower body injury for Will Johnson is that this is something that you might never recover from. To the potential that you were before, you might still be able to play football, but you will not be. The return to play is difficult for an elite athlete, and you might not return to the level you were at previously. So we might not see 2023 Will Johnson again. That's a possibility, and that's a concern here with this type of player. But that being said, modern medicine and all that, maybe the percentages have changed in recent years. Probably worth a shot, right? Like at some point it becomes something you're going to go after. And for some teams, if you have a medical red flag on the player, they're just off your board entirely. You're not even considering them. It will not be taken into account throughout the entirety of the draft process. Obviously, that's not the case here with Arizona. They probably just had him marked down a little bit for it. And I said at some point we become comfortable with this type of player on our team. They like Max Milton. They like Max Milton, who they drafted last year. Garrett Williams has been a steal for them in the nickel. This prevents them from having to play Sean Murphy-Bunting on the outside. And we'll see what the recovery process looks like for Will Johnson. Will he be a day one starter? Will it take a little bit more time? That'll be all very interesting to follow here in the coming weeks and months. But if he's even, say, 85% of what he was in 2023, that's still a solid corner.
Do we know what the specifics of that major injury is, or is it still just kind of hazy what we're looking at there?
I would have to scroll up in a chat for a while, but there was an official medical name that I saw reported last night going into today, I want to say. I'll give me a few minutes as I scroll up here and try to find it.
Well, and while I will filibuster for Sam. So, injury story. Larry Bird injured his hand in college. We were only seeing 85% of Larry Bird's shooting when he was in the NBA. He was actually a better shooter in college, but he injured his hand. So you can still be 85% of your former self and still be an elite athlete.
Wasn't that like a softball game or something too? Like, wasn't it? It was not like a basketball game.
Correct. I don't remember how he injured his hand, but there was something that I don't remember if it was specifically to a finger or his hand, but his shooting motion changed his senior year of college because he had injured his hand the summer before his senior year. He was a better shooter as a junior in college than he ever was in the NBA. And he was, according to me, he's the best small forward in NBA history. But, you know, that's a different story for a different day. So Ursary just went to the Texans. I was wondering if he was going to be picked in the top 50. Who did the Texans get in round 1?
They traded down.
They traded out.
Completely.
And then they grabbed Jaden Higgins.
Is Ursary their first pick of the draft?
Jaden Higgins was their pick, second pick in the second round.
So they got Higgins and Ursary. That's a really good draft for them.
Oh, yeah. I'm not the biggest Ursary fan. I think how much higher I am on Higgins versus how much lower I am on Ursary kind of balances out for me personally. Real quick, Jim and Sam, I'm going to step away for a quick second to go grab my tea. I'm losing this battle to the flu at the moment, so I'm going to kind of try to grab that. I'm going to make it through the rest of this, but here, you guys just filibuster for a slight bit, and I'll be right back.
We can do that.
Yeah, we can handle this. We got it.
Yeah.
Now, Ursary was an interesting player because I know some people I know Joe Marino hates Ursary, but I liked him a lot, actually. I liked him in summer scouting. I know there's some stuff where it's not the cleanest player. He plays a bit off balance, but I'm kind of willing to live with that in the modern NFL where tackle play in general is very volatile. And for a team like Houston, the drop off between, at least on my board, some like Ursary going down to like an Anthony Bell and Arazi Trapilo, like that's a full round and a half gap for me. Like that's something you can't really be messing around with, I think.
Well, and I was saying in the draft professor chat that we were going to see a run on offensive linemen, but this is only the second offensive lineman drafted today, right? It was Sabanea and then Ursary, right?
Yeah, that's it so far.
So we still have Bo on the board. Is there any other offensive lineman that you have close to your top 50 that hasn't been taken yet?
Looking right now, I think there's one. Bo was 50th for me. I heard he didn't interview well. That's probably why he's here. Jared Wilson, 57, the center from Georgia. And the other one who's a pretty unique player that be more scheme dependent, Charles Grant, offensive tackle from William Mary, is probably going to play guard. His movement skills are just insane. He's an athlete that's on another level compared to everyone in this class, but obviously small school player, going to be a big step up in competition. And again, probably going to make the transition from being an offensive tackle in college to being guard here in the NFL. Those are the other guys who are kind of in the general range. I'm not surprised with Bo because he has the position questions. He played tackle. He's played a little bit of guard in college as well, but he'll have to kick inside. And again, I heard he didn't interview so well. Didn't have a good Senior Bowl performance either because he had to play tackle all the time. Wilson being a center, just don't expect that guy to go very high because of the position. And then Grant, of course, has some question marks as a small school player.
I'm going to go take a bio break. I'll be right back.
Yep, sounds good. I have all the power now. It is just me. Yeah, looking through the remaining players in this board, I'll just go ahead and say Demetrius Knight come on the board. This is a bit of a surprise for me, but he's a very interesting player. So Knight was a dual threat quarterback in high school. Committed to Georgia Tech when they were running a very funky, non-translatable offense. Head coach changed. They no longer had a need for Knight to play quarterback the way he was doing. Transfers to Charlotte to play off-ball linebacker. Then to South Carolina this past year. Tremendous character, very well-respected player. A little bit high for me. I think like he's got good GPS numbers in terms of his movement speed, but he doesn't really play that way on tape. I just think he's a little bit more limited in his range and coverage. Great downhill player with good size and power, but not a player who I look at and think is going to really be the Carson Schlesinger type in terms of the range and coverage ability. But Knight's much more of a thumper. Kind of interesting that he went here. But I just think it shows the Bengals have some veteran linebackers that kind of getting to a point where they want to make a couple of changes, which makes sense with where they are in their team building process. I thought they might have even considered Mike Green here because they're not the biggest not the biggest character level organization in the world. I don't mean that to be rude, but they have been more willing to take risks than other groups at this point. And it seems they are just not interested in that right now. Let me see. You talk a little best available. I'll wait for Owen to recover. It's not shocking he's actually sick today. The first time I was doing pick by pick analysis and videos, I got a ton of views on YouTube. I don't do that anymore because I actually got sick from talking too much. So I don't participate that way as much anymore. Seattle back on the clock. I'd be kind of surprised if this wasn't Darren Porter. You know, I think they would highly consider corner in this spot. And Porter, just from a height, weight, speed perspective, is a freaky kind of guy that I could see them really liking. Try to think who else would be in play here. Revel, sorry. From ECU would certainly be in play. The question with him is the knee injury, which I think could become problematic for some teams. Others maybe not. You know, every team has different doctors, has different ways of approving players for return, and different thresholds that they're okay with drafting players at. I think who else? Xavier Watts is still on the board, but they don't really have a need for safety. Oh, I got the pick. It's Elijah Arroyo. There it is. Yeah, Elijah Arroyo is a great pick here. It's a very different style player I thought they would go for. But a really elite level of vertical threat as a tight end. Tremendous speedster. The concerns can be injuries. He really only has 1 year production in college because of injuries. And he got a little banged up in the pre-draft process, which is why he didn't run at the combine, why he didn't finish the week at the Senior Bowl. But I brought him up earlier when we were talking about him versus Mason Taylor. The level of twitch he has as a route runner is just different. He's a very good separator. You don't get that quality of route running and separation ability from most tight ends. The only one who probably comes close in this class would be at the top of the class would be Colson Loveland. And then you got Arroyo after that. Arroyo's got more true speed. Maybe not as refined of route running, but more twitch and true speed and athleticism than you get from a guy like Colson Loveland. Not saying Loveland's not a high-level athlete. He is, but Arroyo just takes things to another level entirely.
Owen hasn't come back yet.
No, not yet. But I
did I hear you say Xavier Watts?
No, I was saying Xavier Watts. I thought would have been potential on the board here, but we've got. We talked about Ursary to Houston, Demetrius Knight a little bit high, but to Cincinnati, then Elijah Arroyo to Seattle, which I really like. I like Arroyo a lot. In case you didn't get that across earlier today,
yeah.
But Arroyo to Seattle is kind of the pick I was just going through right now. The Knight pick feels like a bit of a reach for me, but I think that I think that Cincinnati is signaling that their veteran linebackers they have, they're beginning the process of churning that part of the roster over at this point.
And after Knight, so we've had Schlesinger, we've had Knight. Do you have another day 2 grade on a linebacker?
I didn't even have a. Actually, no, I did have a day 2 grade on Knight. Stutzman from Oklahoma is probably the only other one I could see happening on my board, but I will throw out that name Stutzman. Like I wouldn't want to take top under if I could avoid it. I do know that there's some love for Smile Mondon from Georgia as well because he's just such a high character guy. But it's gonna be a really light linebacker class in the top 100.
Well, so the reason why I'm asking is, let's say from a fascination standpoint, right? So San Francisco, based upon watching mocks, needs a linebacker. So does the Indy. Like whenever I was doing like 32-person mocks, those teams were typically drafting a linebacker on day 1 or 2. So I'm curious if that need is going to move a few more linebackers into day 2. Because to the best of my knowledge, the Colts haven't taken a linebacker. The 49ers definitely haven't.
I do wonder though with the Colts because I know like at least in my mocks, Schlesinger to Indy has been a popular 2nd round pick. Now, I wonder if that has to deal with like the Colts do have a need at linebacker, but I wonder if the value because of the player makes it more likely to happen. Like if it's not Carson Schlesinger, they feel like the drop off is significant enough where they just don't think they're going to get an actual contributing level linebacker in the draft this year, and maybe they just go somewhere else. Now, I will say the Colts have enough quality starters across the roster where they can kind of spend picks however they want to the rest of the way. They've already drafted a rotational edge rusher at this point. So I can see the Colts going almost anywhere with the rest of the picks, but I do think like the drop off from Schlesinger for some of these teams to whatever is now left on the board is so significant that they just might not view that there's being any starters left.
Yeah. And then let's see, we're at pick 52. So you and I have talked about offensive linemen. Ironically, your Jared Wilson comment, I'm part of what I'm doing during the draft is I'm building a shadow team. So it's a way to kind of keep track of your prospects that you liked after you go through the draft process. So Jared Wilson was one of my guys, and I forgot to make my shadow team pick at pick 36, and he was going to be that pick. So I wanted to make sure that I put it in. And then I've got another one. Let's see, what's the 19th pick?
Jimmy, you're gonna laugh, but I'm also building a shadow team here. My pick at 49 was Jared Wilson.
Yep. So
there's only one center left who's actually worth it. I'm gonna take him.
Yes. So yesterday I did Shamar Stewart at 3, and I did Jalen Milroe at 19.
All right. So yesterday I did. The way it's set up with the group I'm doing with is you get 2 picks around. I get pick 1 and pick 17 each round. I got Cam Ward at 1, which shocker. Josh Simmons I took at 17, and then I went and I got a player who hasn't gone yet. I took Jalen Noel with my first pick today because I thought he would go much higher than he has. And the receivers are kind of just sitting around out there actually, but.
I thought Milroe was going to go at 21, and I thought that was going to be a genius pick, but he's obviously still on the board. But yeah, so Parker Blake podcasted on shadow teams, and I'm like, okay, this is something I can get into. And I was even considering plugging it into my website, but I didn't. I'm doing similar 2 picks around, but because this is my first shadow team draft, I'm also doing 2 extra comp picks at the end of rounds 3, 4, 5, and 6. So I get a full 22 players.
Gotcha. Okay.
But then one of the Bengals guys running it says, well, you're ineligible for our league then. And I said, so I'm ineligible. But like if I were to put it on a website, it needs to be something where you have a viable team at the end of year 1.
Right. You have to have a full
My opinion is you have to keep people interested. So you can't draft a partial team because there's nothing for you to track during the regular season.
Yeah, exactly. Because the guys won't be playing. If you're adding UDFAs to your lineup, they won't be playing.
Right. So that was my theory, but like Joe or whoever the Bengals guy is that runs the league that Parker pointed me to didn't like my rule change. And I said, well, I'm making the rules because I'm implementing it on my website. So
welcome back.
All right. So what did I miss? I mean, I can see what I missed, but fill me in like I can't see right now.
So we were talking about the drop off in linebackers and how there's a lot of teams that need a linebacker that didn't get one in the top 50. So we've had 3 linebackers go in the top 51. And like the Colts and the 49ers need a linebacker. They haven't drafted one. And like Sam was saying that maybe Stutzman could still be taken on his board day 2. But that was one of the things we were talking about. And then we were talking about our shadow teams.
Gotcha. Yeah, you're going to have to fill me in on how that works again. Like I came into the middle of the conversation because when I first read it, I was a little confused when you were trying to indoctrinate us over in the Draft Professor group chat about it. So you'll have to we'll have to sit down and figure out how that works.
Well, I'll give a short explanation. Sam can add in whatever he wants, but think of it as a way for you to build your own team of 53 players plus a practice squad. And that's the concept, right? You're building your own roster. You get to do 2 picks per round while you're building the team. So if you have a startup team, like Sam and I are starting a team this year, we get 2 picks per round. And then you get like 10 undrafted free agents. It's like standard rules. And the idea is you're doing this to keep track of the players that you like. Sam, would you like to add anything to that?
No, it's basically like you get a certain picks assigned to you. Like I get picks 1 and 17 in the draft. And basically you have to make your pick, select your player before the team actually picks themselves. And you have their selection of any player that's still on the actual board. So like my team so far, I have Cam Ward. I have Jared Wilson. I've got Jalen Noel, and I've got Josh Simmons so far. So like you just basically pick the player you like best available and try to build out a roster that way.
And then
so
are you
competing? Basically, what would you do if you have the pick? Essentially, what would you do if you had the pick going up?
And then it's like, is there a fantasy element where you're competing against other teams, or is it like just a monitor thing?
The league I'm in is, I think, using like some formula with PFF grading and snap count and stuff like that to put together like a score system, essentially. I don't understand it entirely. I just know that I'm going to pick a lot of really good players, and I'm just going to give you something to do on draft night.
That's very fair.
Yeah, so the scoring is complicated because they like PFF grades are a thing, even if they're not the be all end all. So it's the idea is to correlate something between PFF grades and snap counts. So like you don't want the Mac Hollins playing free safety, giving him a high safety grade as being, okay, I have a good safety on my shadow team. Right, because Mac Hollins played safety for a few snaps, graded high according to PFF, but he doesn't have enough snap counts to qualify for a shadow team at the position.
Gotcha.
Okay.
That makes sense.
But I still don't fully understand the scoring. I'm having fun drafting. Sam and I, ironically, in round 2, our picks were Jared Wilson.
Yeah, same player.
I had the same pick.
But no, I think it is weird. You can kind of like cheese the system a little, I imagine, because certain positions just naturally grade higher than others in PFF system. But Benjamin Morrison to Tampa.
Must not those injuries. I'm surprised he went as high as he did. I have him graded ahead of where they just picked him here, but the hip injuries were kind of a concern. I'm surprised he actually went in the second.
Yeah, Benjamin Morrison ends up going not too far behind Will Johnson and actually ahead of Siobhan Ravel. So,
do you think it's because you bring up 3 guys who had major injuries? So, do you think it's because of injuries? Or do you think it's because they think Ravel isn't as good of a player as the other 2?
Well, Real was less polished than Morrison was, but I think he's a better overall athlete. I think the concern is that the knee injury is just that significant for Ravel. That it's just not a
Mhm.
player who's going to have a lengthy career in the NFL. Now, hopefully, that's not the case. Yeah, I'm not reporting anything here as far as like saying what it is or not. But I think that's the
Yeah.
concern, is that it could impact the career length he has and the long term durability. But when healthy, I think I would probably really, if not for the knee injury, I would take Revel all day over Morrison right now, because Morrison's had 2 hip surgeries, and that just is very concerning for me for an athlete who already was a little bit tight to begin with.
Yeah, like so I have Ravel graded below both Will Johnson and Benjamin Morrison off tape specifically. I really liked Ravel. And like I said, I don't really factor in the injuries nearly as much as like most people should do. And like how in reality, when I'm talking about picks like this, I will factor it in. But for my specific rankings, it's usually just tape wise. So tape wise, I like the other two better than Ravel, at least initially coming in. I thought the other two had a higher floor than Ravel, but Ravel had the ceiling. The injury stuff is where I think it gets interesting, because Ravel had a knee injury, while severe, is one we've seen guys come back from playing from. Whereas with like as you said, with Will Johnson, there's something concerning about whether or not he's going to be able to come back and be 85% Will Johnson, 2023 Will Johnson, or if he's going to ever be close to that. And then you also have the question of like with Benjamin Morrison, it's a chronic injury in a place where he was already not the best when it came to hip fluidity. So there's those question marks. How much injury do you need to get before guys start matching up on your board that you have graded with a significant difference between, like, say, for example, Will Johnson versus Javon Ravel. Ravel's injury is not nearly as severe, but Will Johnson had his more severe injury, but was the better player.
Yeah, I won't fight you too much on that. I mean, I had Morrison with the first round grade over the summer, and then just the mounting injuries kind of scared me off a little bit. But I still have him graded pretty high. Like, this isn't the range I have him graded in. But obviously you wish he had a cleaner bill of health. I will have to hop off here after the next Chicago pick. I have to cut some video up for some people, but we have a couple more picks where I have to get off here. And Anthony Bellin going to Green Bay is a bit surprising this high. Like I had a light third on him.
Yeah, I had him as a day 2 player, but not this high. I wonder. Green Bay always does some weird stuff when it comes to drafting their line and putting them in their specific alignments. So I'm curious to see how it's like, because I think he could be a tackle. Is he going to be a guard for Green Bay? Because I think they had Elton Jenkins at tackle projected wise, or one of their, or whoever their center is currently, or who was drafted to be their center. I know they've been filtering through a ton of guys who have like had a bunch of versatility. So I don't want to say that and be wrong, but another guy who can play inside outside, and you're wondering who's going to end up where at the end, start of the season.
Newt would mock Kelvin Banks to Green Bay frequently. So there clearly is a need there at tackle. I don't know exactly what the need is. Maybe they have a guy with a contract up next year, kind of thing. But like,
so
an
they
offensive lineman to Green Bay
so Sean Ryan's currently penciling to be the starting right guard.
But you're
I think
saying
the only spot you're really seeing right now on that line,
not a tackle.
No, I would say he's a tackle, and I think that's where he was just drafted by the Packers to be. Because for me, looking at their current offensive line output, you got Zach Tom at right tackle. They're comfortable with him there. You have Sean Ryan at right guard. Maybe that's the spot you put Belton if you don't like Sean Ryan all that much. Center Elton Jenkins, left guard. They signed. I just had it up. I put it away. They signed Aaron Banks from the 49ers, and then left tackle is Rasheed Walker, which I liked Rasheed Walker, but I didn't think he was going to be like a non-replacement level starter. I just liked him for being like a day 3 pick when he was coming out.
Can I throw it out here?
Green Bay. Go ahead.
Rasheed Walker's in the final year of his contract, so I imagine they're not going to re-sign him. You're forgetting that they drafted Jordan Morgan in the first round last year, and he played some guard for them before getting injured. So I'm envisioning here is that probably going to see Belton be a guard, because I think Sean Ryan Sean Ryan's contract's probably not the most. I think it's going to come soon here. Let me look. I think you're probably looking at Belton being a guard and maybe kicking. Yeah, Ryan's contract ends after the season. So Ryan and Walker are both free agents. You might not resign either of those guys. And you might just have Jordan Morgan at left tackle, and you might have Belton inside guard.
Sam, would you rather Belton at left tackle or Morgan at left tackle for yourself?
Oh,
personally?
Morgan easily. So Morgan has better movement skills. Morgan's career might be better off at guard, but Morgan has much better ability to protect his outside shoulder than Belton does. Belton's a little bit heavy set. He can play low if he wants to, but in terms of like the leverage capabilities and movement skills, it's just not the same level as you get from a guy like Jordan Morgan.
Yeah, I think with Morgan, it's the question of the length and the fact that they played him at guard already in his career makes you think that they're also thinking that it's going to be a potential possibility. But I would have to see Morgan fail inside first, then be automatically going into the season expecting Belton to be the left tackle. I think Belton could potentially develop into a tackle and play on the outside in the NFL level, but I think he's much more comfortable as a guard.
And Sam, I want to give you a shout out. ESPN just showed Trey Harris thrown to Malik Neighbors.
There we go. I knew it was going to be a storyline if it popped up. That's a great pick for the Chargers, by the way. Like, way to diversify your room. You know, you've got McConkey, now you get Trey Harris, two very different style receivers. Should be really good for them.
What do you think this means for Quentin Johnston?
Well, I think Quentin Johnston already knew it was coming down the pipeline at some point, I had to imagine. I mean, look, he's going to rotate in anyways because they need to have the bodies at receiver. And Mike Williams is not going to play a massive snap count, I imagine, considering the kind of tape he put out there last year for the Jets and Steelers. But, yeah, Quentin Johnston's not going to be a second contract player for this team.
Yeah, I was looking at – I predicted them to go wide receiver in round one, specifically – a player like Golden, because I thought looking at that wide receiver room that you don't want to rely on Johnston or Mike Williams to be your outside receiver. You have Ladd McConkey, who I think can play on the outside, but is more comfortable in the slot. So if you can get a guy who is an outside receiver and can play opposite, and like you said, does diversify that room, that's where you get better. And Trey Harris, I think, comes in as just of those three dudes who are all tall and can run fast in a straight line and get downfield and attack the ball. Fits that same mold, and I think walking in day one, you'd expect him to get the starting snaps over both of those guys, just because Williams with the injuries and Johnston's just been so inconsistent. I'm curious, especially because of how Harbaugh runs his offenses, if they're going to look to be more vertical now. Like obviously they invested in Warren Hampton, they brought in Najee Harris, they're going to want to run the ball. I can definitely see a more play action heavy deep shots, like dialing those up a lot more often than what we saw last year. Especially with I didn't think they really had the juice at wide receiver to do that. And even though Trey Harris isn't a burner per se, like a top end speed guy, he's still someone who excels by winning down the field. So I think that might be where they're trying to lean towards, and that's kind of the Greg Roman system as it is anyway.
Yeah, Harris does a really good job separating the late on go routes. So he gets not a ton of separation up the course of the play, but very late he'll get a couple yards and give you just enough space. Complete throws downfield. And Herbert obviously has the arm to take advantage of that stuff. So I do envision them being more aggressive, I'll say, with their approaches going forward.
Yeah, and I think when we did our wide receiver rankings episode for Draft Professor, I had Trey Harris as one of I think he was a top 3 player in the category of playing above the rim, like contested catch players. So you have a guy in Herbert who can get it down the field to him, but you also have a player now that offers that size and ability to go up and make plays where you're hoping Quentin Johnston was going to be that guy, and he just hasn't been so far. Mike Williams, like I said, he fits the skill set there that they've had and looked to bring in, but you have a player that resets the clock on that position, is younger, and potentially has a chance to win snaps and then be better at that role than the two guys who were already there.
So Chicago's on the clock, and I didn't realize this when Buffalo traded up, but Buffalo traded both seconds and a fourth to move up. Did you see that, Owen, at the time that Buffalo moved up for Sanders?
Yeah, so they moved up. So basically the trade boils down to, in simple terms, You went from 56 to 41, so you go up by 15 spots. And you go from 62 to 72 in exchange for that. On top of you exchanged a 7th for a 4th this year. So
Got it. Okay.
you're swapping a 4th for a 7th, and then you're just off. You're accepting to move down 10 spots into the top of the 3rd, as opposed to picking at 62 in the back half of the 2nd.
Okay, well, that makes sense because you said it that way when you announced it, but I didn't understand it till you said it the second time.
Yeah, I don't think it's a terrible trade. I know people are specifically. We have our Bills War Room chat still together from our Epic mock that thought that was a bit of an overpayment. For me, moving up 15 spots into the top 50, and the worst you're getting is you're moving down 10. So you're going from 62 to 72. You're still in the top 75 there. Yeah, 109 hurts to lose, but you have one. I think you have 112, whereas one other ones in the 1 teens. So there's picks there that you're not. Well, yeah, you'd like to keep those picks, and you were set up pretty with those, and you'd like to just maneuver around a little bit more while keeping those picks. I don't think the trade was terrible when it comes to value and moving around a little bit and not having to sacrifice as much to move up as much as you did.
I think the value of the trade is fair. During Epic Mock, there may have been some podcaster that was upset with the value to even move up in round 3. So I'm glad that made you laugh.
Yeah.
No,
I
like getting Sanders. I definitely like the idea of we got Sanders, and I think there was some documentation that Sanders, even though it looks like he would play the same role as Oliver, he's actually 25 pounds heavier than Oliver with longer arms.
I can definitely see them coexisting in certain packages. Yes, I wouldn't say I'd do that consistently, but that's something I can definitely see, especially with the way the Bills operate with the fronts and how heavy their rotation is and how variable it can be. So Sam said he had to leave after this Bears pick, so let's quickly touch on it so that way we can let Sam go here. Ozzie Trapilo, left tackle out of Boston College to the Bears. That seemingly is the Braxton Jones replacement. I think the world of Trapilo. I loved his tape. He played. The only thing that concerns me a bit was that he didn't have the best length, and that showed up a little bit on tape. But movement wise, the ability to do enough when it comes to a power blocking system and not have to worry about him not being able to hold his weight in double teams and still being able to get out into space and block at the second level, get out on the boundary. I feel like he is a player that if you're going to run some wider zone schemes, you're going to love Trapilo as a pass blocking left tackle as well as someone who can be on the move and blocking in space for you.
Yeah, what impressed me with his anchor, like even compared the tackle they have on the other side of him at Boston College is a really promising player. Is going to be probably a high level pick this coming year, but his anchor, his ability to shut down. I'm trying to remember who it was. It might have been Gelati from Louisville when they faced each other this year. Really impressed me. I don't think he was as good in the Senior Bowl. Looking at him, he's very tall, but he's not very broad. And I think that's kind of course, the length shows up as well. So he doesn't have maybe like the reach you would expect for some of these offensive tackles. I saw some people speculating about him kicking inside the guard. He's just a little bit too tall of a player, in my opinion, to do that. This is probably and maybe this is just you're having your raw tackles now with Belton and those kind of guys. You feel like you're desperate to pick a player. This is probably a round rich for me. I thought he was a 3rd round player. I wouldn't have really gone for him this high in the draft. It just doesn't feel like a great fit because I can see a scenario in which case he's not going to be a consistent contributor for you. Like if you draft a receiver in the 2nd round is not necessarily great, he could still be a wide receiver 3 potentially and give you something and play special teams. There's a chance someone like Trapilo with his build just doesn't end up working out, and then you get really nothing in exchange for the pick.
That's fair, and I think the fact that he's going to a team that's not going to have Braxton Jones is there, and he's the cemented starter. He's not going to have to worry about starting from day one. He has a chance to eventually win the job, or if anything, find a different spot to start in. It's not like he's going to be pushed to play super early on just because they have so many cemented players already there. Like you'd want him to be able to play early and have some return on that investment. But for right now, I don't think with him landing in Chicago, they have time to find the correct spot to play him.
So the Lions just traded up for somebody.
Well, maybe I'll stick around. Oh, there it is. All right, I'll stick around
Tate
for this one.
Ratledge.
Okay, they needed interior line. That makes sense.
It's a very brand player for them in terms of like the mentality he plays with. This getting him and Tyreek in the first round. It's a very much a brand draft for Detroit right now.
Yeah, and they had to jump Baltimore because I bet Baltimore would have picked him 2 spots later.
Yeah.
Who are we thinking that? So I know they had a need at the interior offensive line. Who are we thinking that that's going to be the replacement for? Because they have Mahogany and the Glasgow are their 2 penciling starter.
Oh yeah, so I mean, it could probably. I mean, frankly, like if Mahogany doesn't work out, probably there. But like they have a lot of faith in him. I think Glasgow, you saw a bit of dip in performance last year. He's been an older player. This is probably more of a long term.
Yeah, I agree.
But I do have to hop off. I have to cut some video up. I've got some Senior Bowl interviews that I have to post with some of the guys who got picked. So I have a lot of work to do now going into tomorrow. But
hey, Sam, it's awesome hanging out with you. Like,
I was great getting to talk to you and Owen. I always appreciate it. It's always a good time.
All right. Well, you enjoy. I'll definitely be checking out whatever you guys put on. I know, Sam, you have the Substack that you put out regularly. You just were participating in the Huddle Report Top 15 as we talked about when you first joined on. So congratulations with that. And we'll be looking out for anything else you post out there and have out specifically, like you said, like these interviews from the Senior Bowl, covering the draft in general.
Thanks, and I'll talk to you later. And I hope you feel better, man. Have a good rest of your stream.
Hey, we're fighting through it, but thank you.
you're doing a good job fighting through it, Owen.
Yeah, it's for me, it's a lot of it's not really sinuses. I'm both warm and cold at the moment, so I feel like it's like that weird, you feel weak, but you're fine. You feel tired, but you're not tired. I'm sure if I went to the night, I wouldn't be able to sleep. It's not really sinuses, but it's all more of the chest congestion. That's where all the coughs coming from. So hopefully I can battle through it. At the worst, we can aim to close at the second, and if we'll see what we can reevaluate from there. But I want to be able to make it to the bottom of the third there to really get the full day 2 stream going. I've had a good time so far. It's been interesting to see some of the picks that have gone and how it complements what's happened in the first round. I do have to mourn the loss of Femi Oladejo going to the Titans while I was gone, and Nick Scordon, 2 players that, with the Bills and still needing an edge, I would have 1,000% taken. I think Femi Oladejo was my favorite pick for them, just because with how the edge room is set up right now, you have guys who are going to be your starters. You have Epinesa, you have Rousseau, Bosa's there. You're going to get Hoyt back. You have players that are set to start this year. And the fact that Oladejo he's been only playing edge for like half a season. Like, he started the first 2 games of the season as a linebacker. You have a guy who is still learning the position. So yeah, maybe he wouldn't, whoever you're drafting edge, you're not expecting to contribute year 1 anyway. So you might as well draft the guy who has the greatest upside for one reason or the other. And that would be me. For me, it was Oladejo. But he goes to Titans. I think schematically in that defense where they've historically liked those type of rushers where they're more the 3-4 outside linebackers. I felt Oladejo had the weight and the mass to be a more of a front the end, but I think he'll be utilized wherever he is. He's such a good upside. Jack Bech here to the Raiders at wide receiver. So now you have the potential. I was gonna say I'm a big fan of that. You're gonna have the Raiders roll up with Brock Bowers, Jack Bech, who's a former tight end turned wide receiver, and then they're handing the ball out to Ashton Jeanty. Like, that's going to be a punch you in the face, run down your throat style of offense there.
Yeah, and they have Geno throwing the ball for at least a year or 2.
Right, yeah. Going back up to the picks I missed, we were talking about the running linebackers. We had Schlesinger and Jahad Campbell went day 1. Schlesinger went at 33, and now we have Demetrius Knight. The linebacker class in general was kind of top-heavy. Though there's a ton of guys at the top half, day 3, that you're really excited about for filling specific needs or being scheme-specific. But I think outside of like Demetrius Knight and the 2 guys who went ahead, there wasn't really a lot of scheme transcendent players. So I'm not surprised seeing him come off earlier than I would have taken him, but early enough. So remind me, Jim. It's I can pull it up in my profiles right now in a second if I need to. But is Ratledge from Georgia? There was like 3 interior offensive linemen coming out of Georgia this year. I know it's not Jared Wilson; he was the center. But is Ratledge the guard that was the consistent starter, or was he the one that only had like 13 or 14 games started and was a super high athlete?
I think that was Dylan Fairchild, wasn't it?
Yeah, I get the two of them mixed up. Obviously, interior lineman from Georgia, but I think Ratledge was the higher floor consistent starter, whereas Fairchild was the higher upside player.
I would agree, and it seems like when you find people that like Fairchild, it's like a cult. Because there's a group of them. Like Joe likes Fairchild. Clint, who I think podcasted the O-line the week that you were out. So it was the second week that we were podcasting with Draft Professor. When you were out at your family's funeral. Clint is a Fairchild truther. But those people don't grow on trees. The idea is if you're drafting an offensive lineman that you need to start in a year, you don't need him to start right now. I think Fairchild is like the head of that group. Right? I think every offensive lineman drafted so far is likely penciled in as a day one starter.
Yeah, I can definitely see that.
Right, for whichever team took him, every offensive lineman off the board in the first 2 rounds is likely starting for their respective teams day one. I don't know that Fairchild is worthy of a top 102 pick because he's not going to be starting. He needs a year because he's only had like 13 starts, to your point.
Right. So I have Ratledge with a later 2, and then Fairchild with a higher 3. So I'm close with both of them, and that's what I think. So like when I do my grades, and I was curious to hear this because I heard Joe talking about his grades, Joe Marino of the Locked On NFL Scouting, Locked On Bills podcasts, NFL First Read podcast too. Does so many different things now. But he was talking about his grading scale heading up to this with his Bill-specific big board. And a lot of what he talked about was the fact that he grades based off of potential. Like this guy has the potential to be X, potential to be Y. And I'm curious to pick his brain about it whenever I get a chance to talk to him next. Because there is the idea that you want to draft off potential, sure. But there's also players that give you a floor, and while their potential isn't what you're basing, you don't base it off their potential in that case. Like so for me, like take Ratledge. I'm not drafting him expecting him to be, and I think Ratledge versus Fairchild is perfect here. Because Ratledge, I'm not expecting him to be to the ceiling that Fairchild showed because of who they were in college and what they accomplished and what their pathway to starting was. I'm drafting Ratledge for entirely different reasons than I'm drafting Fairchild, but I have them graded fairly similarly because one player has the higher floor, whereas the other one has the higher ceiling. So I'm curious to see how, like how Joe was saying, how it's a lot of potential. How does he factor in players that you draft them? Their floor is like a good backup to an average starter, versus guys who are boom or bust, where you're not sure if like they don't pan out, they're not on your team after their rookie contract, but if they do pan out, they have the talent to, be studs. So I'm curious how he tackles that, and specifically when it comes to like Fairchild versus Ratledge, what's his take on that with that context? Now, this Ravens pick's taking a little bit of time to get in here.
So yesterday I was able to follow Jordan Schultz. And he had the picks tweeted out before they ever appeared on the network.
Gotcha.
Mike Green to the Ravens.
You know what? That just pissed me off. Because you know what? I had Mike Green to the Ravens in my huddle report, first round mock draft. And I could have gotten an extra point and beaten Newt if they just took him when I thought they were going to take him. No, they took him at 59 instead.
Oh,
no.
This is you guys are going to be able to poke each other at this for a year. This is hysterical.
Yeah. I got him back though because we were talking about how the greatest jersey swap of all time would be if the Packers drafted Golden, who he has like wide receiver 6 or 7, and I had and I had Ibuka similar wide receiver 6 or 7. So if the Bills drafted Ibuka and Golden was drafted by the Packers, it'd be like the most legendary jersey swap of all time between the two of us. And the Bills didn't take Ibuka; they didn't get a chance. But the Packers did take Golden. So that was my response to him on Twitter. Was he said that all that mattered was that he beat me in the huddle report, and I basically said back that his reward for doing so was I'll buy him a Matthew Golden Packers jersey.
Well, and reward. Maybe Buffalo draft Luke Kandra, and you can.
That would be beautiful if Luke Kandra was a Buffalo Bill
or Riley Mills.
That one I see less so. Like I can definitely see Kandra because if the Bills if they have internally found a spot where they can see an offensive lineman making the roster isn't currently on the roster, I could see if they grabbed a guy like Kandra, that would be the spot that you can make that realistically happen. But just having my understanding of how roster manipulation happens and understanding how teams look at it in the future from my current experiences, I can tell that like they can have a spot where they've circled a guy and they're like, we're willing to move off of this player, or we're willing to have a competition for this spot that's more likely to go the way of a new player than the tackle spot. Whereas and Kandra fits that just because he's a good player and it's a guard who there's a lot less variance when it comes to like how they can fit versatility wise. Whereas I think Mills I think he's exclusively a 5 tech. Like he's fine as like a 3 tech and being more towards the interior. I don't know how well his core strength is going to hold him down. He's been dealing with those major injuries, but I thought with the fact that he had so much length and ability to play in space, he was for me what Derek Harmon was if Derek Harmon couldn't reduce inside. Like I'm assuming what Derek Harmon was at Michigan State because he added a ton of weight going from Michigan State to Oregon, and I didn't check out any of Derek Harmon's Michigan State tape. But from what I've been told about what he probably played like there and why he took such a massive leap when he got to Oregon, I feel like that's how I view Riley Mills was Michigan State level Derek Harmon, which I still have a 3rd round grade on Riley Mills. Now he's not going to go there because of the injuries, but I could definitely see I couldn't see him making the Bills team just because of schematic purposes. Whereas Kandra, if they did want to invest into an offensive lineman, I could see him being a pick for us.
I could see a path to the roster for nearly any position that Buffalo drafts outside of quarterback. Like I could sell even a running back as long as we know the running back can play special teams, like a Khalil Mullings, right? The linebacker turned running back at Michigan.
Yeah.
Like I could see us with him being running back 4. He's never going to touch the ball on offense, but you're going to be able to put him on the 53 and you're going to be able to play him every Sunday because he's going to be able to play 4 phases of special teams.
Now, does he take over the spot from wide receiver who would play special teams for you, or would it just be he takes Reggie Gilliam's spot? Like where are you removing a guy on your set roster?
So it might be the 6th linebacker. It wouldn't be in place of a 5th wide receiver. So it'd be like how we used Taiwan Jones before.
Gotcha.
Right.
If they're just purely special teams, it's gonna have to come from either a depth, like super depth running back, super depth wide receiver, corner, safety, or linebacker, like you were saying. So linebacker, I think that is the best path from what you said.
And when we didn't roster Taiwan Jones, did we go +1 in the defensive backfield? Like, because I feel like at the early part of McDermott's tenure, we were at 9 defensive backs in the 53, and I feel like now we're at 10. But I'm not actually counting. I just feel like that's where we added.
That's a phenomenal question. I will look that up right now because the last time Taiwan Jones was on our roster was 2020 to 2022. Before that, it was 2017 to 2018 with a stop in the Texans in between. I think when that change would happen would have been in 2022. So we can look at real quick that if you want to talk about Jim, I didn't dive into this running back class nearly as deep. So if you want to give some thoughts on RJ Harvey to the Broncos, if not,
okay, RJ Harvey. Okay, so Jake Robertson is going to love this pick. So I think at this point, Harvey is the 5th running back off the board. We've had Henderson, Judkins, Hampton, Genty. RJ Harvey is RB5. Shout out to Jake Robertson, Glory Day Sports. RJ Harvey was his RB3. He really liked Harvey. So somebody that when he runs the ball, he runs it really well. Doak Walker, award winner, 3rd team All-American. That's a good pick for Denver. They're getting themselves a running back that can run the ball. That's what they need. So I don't know what the Denver fans in the group chat think of that. I'm about to go find out. But
Well, that was the spot we kept predicting for running back was Denver with Omar and Hampton. So
Denver definitely needed a running back, right? So who is the North Carolina guy that went to Dallas? North Carolina to Denver to Dallas. Javonte.
No, Javonte Williams.
Yeah. So Javonte Williams went to Dallas.
Williams.
So Denver has Estime, and now they have Harvey.
Mm-hmm.
So, and I don't think Denver's done with running backs. So I think they went Harvey, and I bet in round 7 they're going to double dip. Because I believe their running back room there is a little bit thin. So I definitely like that. Okay, and the Commanders just took Trey Amos at pick 61. Did you see a world where Trey Amos went?
I forgot he was still there. That's insane. There was another player who I thought would be a first round pick. I wonder what the I wonder what the drop was there for that was. Maybe it could have been the lack of high end athleticism, if I had to guess. But even then, like he still overcame a lot of that and was a solid player. I didn't think that he was, late 2nd round worthy. Gives me a lot of flashbacks to when I was high on Cam Smith.
So I think this is a testament to what we've said all along about this draft class. You could have a player graded at 20, and another team is going to have him graded at 60, and neither grade is crazy. Right? There's like that middle tier of players in this draft, and I think we're at the tail end of it. Has Revel been drafted yet?
He is not.
Okay. So that's that's an interesting medical flag.
I say that was what me and Sam were discussing earlier, was how the injuries between Morrison, Revel, and Will Johnson impacted their stock compared to like where you had them originally graded and how that may have impacted that. Sorry, I'm fact checking this this thing with Taiwan Jones. It's becoming a lot more complex than I originally thought it would, because not only Taiwan Jones last year on the roster was 2022. Not only did we have 5 backs that year, including a fullback, we had 7 receivers because Marquez Stevenson made the roster. The following season,
he was on IR, so you can say he made the roster, but he was never he was very rarely active on game day. He was on IR more than anything else.
Yeah, the following season, we cut down to 6 receivers, and which included Justin Shorter, who was also on IR the whole year, and from 7 the year before. Now, offensive line, we had 4, 8, 9, and 9 the next year. Defensive tackle, we rostered 5 in 2023 and 4 in 2022. Where are all these players going? 5 edges. 5 edges. 5 edges. Okay, that doesn't help us. 6 linebackers in 23, opposed to 6 linebackers in 2022. Corner. We had 7 corners in 2023, with 6 corners in 2022. Okay, that's where one of those roster spots went to.
Who were
And then it's-
was Cam Lewis considered one of those 7? Because
He was, yeah.
that's what I'm saying is that when you have a Cam Lewis that can play all 3 defensive back positions, right? We could put him at safety, slot, boundary. That allows you to have like the Mullings on offense in that Taiwan Jones spot. I'm not saying that's a good use of the roster, right? Like I'm saying that I can see a path to where that's the decision they would make.
Yeah.
Because even
Which
go ahead.
I was gonna say Cam Lewis. So just to make it clear, Cam Lewis is listed as a cornerback both as 2022 and 2023. So if you,
Okay.
it doesn't really affect our numbers. The only position we really went down in, so we went down to running back, receiver. We went up in corner. Everything else is pretty static. I don't know how that math works out, but I'm sure there was some stuff with IR that's not factored into this list. But
And I don't know what site you're using. I tend to use a Pro Football Reference
yeah,
when I'm doing that analysis. And one of the things that Pro Football Reference does is that if a player was on the 53 at any point of the season, they list them. But it doesn't tell you what the 53 was coming out of camp. Right? Because once you have the roster coming out of camp, you're locked into those contracts. Whereas any player that comes on or off the 53, you're only paying them for the games that they're actually on the 53.
yeah. So the list I'm using right now is from Buffalo Rumblings, like a website, a news site
Okay.
covering the cuts.
Okay. And so the reason why I would say that is that I can't remember a year where Buffalo had 6 wide receivers in the 53 coming out of camp. Like, because whether it's Stevenson or Shorter, even if they were to be the 6th wide receiver, they were immediately put on IR, so I don't count that.
Well, so that year when Stevenson was the 6th guy, he was actually the 7th receiver.
Who were the other 6?
I just closed it out. Let me pull it back up.
Was one of those Kumaro?
It may. I think it was another like special teams guy.
Mm-hmm.
Let's see. So wide receiver in 2022, there was 7: Diggs, Davis, McKenzie, Crowder, Shakir, Kumaro, Stevenson.
Okay. So that was like the only year I can remember that they carried 6.
You know, looking at that list from 2022, besides the fact that Diggs was a top end receiver, the room as a whole was not much better than we have currently.
I would agree.
Like, sure, we don't have the top end talent, but I think we have more depth now. Like, I would take Keon as a whole over like Shakir isn't better than Diggs, obviously. Keon and Davis, I will put that as a push because Gabe Davis was very limited, just as Keon was, but Keon was a rookie. Then you have McKenzie versus now Jordan Palmer, which we don't know what we're going to be getting out of him. But you just anticipate with how much they paid him and what he's looked like previously with the Chargers, you'd get more out of him than McKenzie. And like the more comp with that would be Curtis Samuel, which I think McKenzie was better than Samuel, but McKenzie also got more targets. And then you're having, like we said, like Kumaro, Crowder, and Stevenson, who did nothing.
So if Palmer isn't better than McKenzie, he should be coming out of camp. Like, I never saw McKenzie as anything more than a fan favorite unless he played New England. Right? Some of us in that in the Bills War Room group chat, so like Alex Cullen, like one of the things that he and I agree on is that Shakir is best if he's a wide receiver 3. Like the wide receiver transactions for the roster should be to make Khalil Shakir wide receiver 3.
When you say wide receiver 3, though, what are you quantifying as wide receiver 3? Like, are you talking about third as in he's the slot player, or third as in he is the third most targeted player on the offense of wide
Both.
receivers?
It's both. It would be both. So definitely you don't want him to be the featured point of the passing game.
Sure.
You would want at least two other receivers that rival Shakir in targets and yards and production.
I'd be more than comfortable. I'd be fine. If you had him, if he was your wide receiver 3, that's an elite wide receiver room. I'm more than comfortable with him being wide receiver 2 when it comes to that's who you're filtering your second most production out of through. But I can definitely see why. Yeah, like imagining Shakir as wide receiver 3 is super appealing because he's so good right now as basically a wide receiver 1 that you have a previous wide receiver 1 as your wide receiver 3. It just goes to show how much more productive your wide receivers have been in that offense.
Nope.
So we got Shamar.
I can compromise and make Shakir wide receiver 2, but that would imply that Keon Coleman would likely be the likely wide receiver 1 in target share with the way that the roster is now. But even if it were Coleman and Kincaid ahead of Shakir in the target share, I can see that as also being Shakir's wide receiver 3.
So I think that's where my take would come in, would be that I would want to add somebody to be the 1 in target share. Because you want Keon to get targets, sure, but you'd like it to be more sparingly because of the type of receiver he is. If Keon's getting 100+ targets, you're not utilizing him right. Because a lot of his targets should be contested down the field, low percentage throws that you're throwing only a handful of times a game. So if you're targeting Keon Coleman 100+ times a season, that's not utilizing him to his best ability. So for me, I would want Shakir to be number 2 in targets simply because he is the slot player and ability to be more. He'll be your 10 catch player because he's your safety valve and ability to play in space and work with Allen. But I would want somebody who is a bona fide. I would want to add somebody, or hopefully Kincaid could develop, or just Jordan Palmer can break out. Someone like that could be your number 1 in targeting, so that way Shakir doesn't have to be the number 1 receiver. I would want him to be I don't think any of that's realistically to happen. I think you would have to add that player, which is why the offense worked so much better when Amari Cooper joined, because then Shakir became the number 2 in the pecking order when a defense is processing who the number 1 receiver is. That's when you were working most optimally, and then you have Keon in selective spots with contested catch balls. You have Jordan Palmer in selective spots with. If when you're facing man coverage or against the blitz, you have him getting 50 to 70 targets a year. Keon, 50, 70 targets a year, but the majority of those coming in, play-specific shots. Like they're supposed to be play and touch specific. Shakir's more all around. He's lower ceiling because of his size, but he can eat up targets. That's the type of receiver he is. And then you want someone else who can also eat up targets, but also be like a guy on the outside. I think that's what they're missing right now.
Yeah, and with Shakir, to me, without using analytics, what it feels like to me is that most of Shakir's touches are manufactured. His average depth of target is not very far, right?
No, yeah, it's also because he's the only player. Like they brought in Curtis Samuel to be that player, but he's just been not available. Like I'm sure if Curtis Samuel was available for this team and playing up to his contract, Shakir wouldn't be used on those wide receiver screens nearly as often as he's been being used on, which is what's tanking those analytics and those advanced stats.
So we're almost at the end of round 2 here. And I also need to give a shout out. So my girlfriend made buffalo dip, and it's really good. It is really good.
Jealous. I am so jealous. That makes me want to go and I make a buffalo chicken wing pasta. Now I want to make some of that. Even though I have wings downstairs. I ordered wings last night for the draft party, so I have some leftover wings. I'm gonna crush when we're done with this. But that sounds amazing.
I have a question. Do you think
Go right
Buffalo's
ahead.
3rd round pick is going to be Pooh Paul?
Jim, you've been selling me on it. I'm not gonna lie. I can definitely see it happening, just from how interactive they've been with him as a player. I can also see, because he's still there, as Landon Jackson. and they might think they can get Pupal in the fourth.
So I would agree it's going to be Landon Jackson over Pupal. That I'll agree with.
And then maybe they'll trade up to the back half of the third to grab Pupal, but without 109, I don't know how serious that is.
So I've had a conversation with Pupal's dad today. So first of all, if Buffalo drafts him, I'm actually coming to Buffalo tomorrow. His dad and I are going out for wings.
Nice.
So I'll send you an invite.
Awesome.
But yeah, actually, that's interesting that Landon. I liked how you pointed out that Landon Jackson's still here. So okay, we're at the beginning. We're at the beginning of round 3. Are there any players on your board that you didn't think would get out of round 2 that are like Landon Jackson? To me, is the obvious one. A couple of the wide receivers like Noel not being drafted. I felt like Noel was going to go in round 2. Shedeur is obviously here. Has Xavier Watts been taken?
Nope.
So Makuba got taken over Watts.
He did, yes.
Okay, so if you're Buffalo and you've got that pick in round 3 and you have to choose between Landon Jackson and Xavier Watts.
I'm probably taking Landon Jackson for myself just because I like him better than Watts and how I view the edge position more so than the safety position when it comes to need. But I do know there's some people who are super high on the edge or safety being a need for this team. I'm just real quick updating my big board because I can filter it. I added a new tab so I can filter by who's been drafted, and then I can leave me with the top remaining players on my board who have not been drafted yet. So I think I'm all set. So there's only one player left that I have a first round grade on that has been drafted, and that's Darius Alexander, which we can chalk that up to being age related. We just saw 2 D tackles of Shamar Turner and Omar Norman-Lott go off the board in the back half of the second there, which Omar Norman-Lott to the Chiefs. I'm torn on how much I like that when it comes to the fact that he's not going to be able to defend the run, so you can run right at him away from Chris Jones. At the same time, on passing downs, that's going to suck.
Omar Norman-Lott went to the Chiefs?
Yeah, he did.
Oh, my God.
And then it was Omar Norman-Lott to the Chiefs. Shamar Turner went to the Commanders, I believe.
That doesn't make sense for the Commanders.
I'm sorry, the Bears. They went to the Bears.
Thank you.
Shamar Turner went to the Bears with the Bills pick, and then Andrew McCool went to the Eagles. So the Bears used their 2 picks from the Bills for Ozzie Tropilo and Shamar Turner. So the Bills got TJ Sanders and whoever they take at 72 here. And then the other 2 I'm not really that torn up about. Maybe one now I'll care more about. But back to the big board here. I can share this tab.
Marcus Bowe, Wyatt Milam, making it out of 1-2.
Wyatt Milam is surprising. I didn't get around him for an official grade, but as a player that I've heard a ton about when it came to high second round buzz, like that's crazy to me. I have Darius Alexander. He was my highest available player. Then Princely Umanulelin, Landon Jackson, Ayumanner, A.Z. Thomas, Javon Ravel, Darian Porter. I have a sneaking suspicion Darian Porter, because of age and limited playing in college, makes him last until the 4th. When I woke up this morning, like Darian Porter is definitely a 4th round pick. And he's a player that I would be fine double dipping with in the 4th round. Clearly, I have him graded higher. So those guys, I'm surprised made out. Josiah Stewart, I'm surprised made it out. Kyle Williams, Jordan Birch, Dur Sanders, Mark Simbaugh.
Darius Alexander is off the board. He just went to the Giants.
All right. There he is. Now, I'm not surprised by that because I thought he would be there was no way he had the talent of a day 2 player. No doubt. He had the talent of a day 1 player, in my opinion. But with all the question marks when it comes to age, ability to have him on contract, I've even started to swing my opinion because I was originally team. It's not that big a deal because you can have basically contract control for a guy that you're after in the first round until he's 32 between the 5th year option and 2 franchise tags. And then at that point, that's the equivalent of the age should be if they were 23. You put them through 2 contracts. So that was my take originally about why I didn't hate the age argument for Alexander and Porter, but I can definitely see why teams would be scared off by it. So him going top of the third, practically a second round pick, that's fine in my book, especially for someone I thought was as talented as he was. So my best remaining player now is Princely Umanumelin and then Landon Jackson, which I would, if I'm the Bills, I'd much rather have Landon Jackson than Princely. His style of edge rusher for me. Ashton Gillott.
I have to make a shadow team pick here in 2 picks, and I'm going right now between Princely and Landon Jackson and Xavier Watts. And there we go. Gillott is off the board to KC.
He was someone I thought would be a textbook Bills guy. I had him as a high 4, just because I didn't think he had the full, complete package as a pass rusher, at least immediately. Like he played with power. He was able to. He had twitch, but for a lot of times he was just winning because he had power, twitch. Didn't have to be as much of a technician to win. So for him, being a guy who can reduce on inside, he played a lot of 3-tech at Louisville. I thought that was screaming Bills, but obviously didn't make it to them. They still have not picked an edge rusher. I'm still mourning the loss of Femi Oladejo as the Bills pick here. Let's see. I got to mark off. Oh, Ariana Terry went. Omar Not went. JTT went. Ashton Gillotti went. You know who's someone that we covered super early on in our coverage of the D-tackle room for the Draft Professor that I'm surprised has not gotten buzz as like a day 3 type player that's a steal. I wish I was going back and forth between him, putting him on my All My Guys video, but I like Tonka Hemingway too much, and this guy is exclusively a 3-tech. But Ty Hamilton from Ohio State, he's not going to give you pass rush upside. Not at all. And that was what I was kind of getting at with Sam earlier, was JTT was their best pass rusher, and I still didn't love him as a pass rusher, like a pure pass rusher right away. But the rest of that D-line, they performed highly because they were so talented across the board, but they didn't have any stud individual pass rushers. You had Tyreek, who was too finesse for me to win consistently. Jack Sawyer, who had one move, and his arms were too short to execute that all the time. JTT, who I didn't really see what Sam saw when he said he had a bunch of stuff put together. I think he had the athleticism and heavy hands, and he did flash it on occasion. I didn't think it was consistent enough to be able to say he was a good pass rusher coming out. And then Ty Hamilton, who offers you no pass rush upside, but he's a strong run defender as a 3-tech. If you're a team like the Bills, and they didn't take TJ Sanders yet, and you were worried about, okay, if Dwayne Carter is our 1-tech, and we want to be able to run smaller players and still be able to defend the run, having a guy like Ty Hamilton as your 3-tech boosts that floor, because you have a guy, even though he's not the traditional position on the line to defend the run that way, he's a stack and shed type 3-tech player who's still smaller but knows how to use his leverage, knows how to read plays. I felt like he was somebody that was being slept on the line. I haven't heard his name once in this entire draft cycle. So, similarly to Tonka Hemingway as well, but so that was my what I was going back and forth between when I did my guys D-line.
It's interesting about Tonka Hemingway too, because you're right. We covered him really early, and after we covered him, I don't know that I saw too many other people even talking about him.
Dude, he's so good. I love Tonka Hemingway.
Well, and I think your scouting report is proving. I think one of the things I'm learning is after the scouting reports that we went through, I think we may have hyped guys up in our head and moved them higher. Do you remember the very first 32-person mock draft we did? And
vaguely.
You were on the podcast.
Yeah.
Right? And one of the things that happened in that mock draft that happened in this draft is the defensive tackles went early. When you had the pick, the 5 defensive tackles that were off the board before Buffalo's pick in the real draft were also off the board there. And what I'm using this to kind of make the point that we may have like if I'm listening even to like the scouting report on Joshua Farmer, have we as draft analysts hyped him up more? Because the scouting report on Farmer came back pretty much in the same neighborhood as Hemingway. But everybody right now is talking about Joshua Farmer going significantly higher.
I never got that. And even like guys I respect when it comes to watching tape, real quick, Harold Fannin Jr. to the Browns at 67. So there's that pick. But for me, Farmer was played. I've heard people like Joe Marino talk about watching Farmer and what he sees in him. And I thought maybe it was because I hadn't watched him, re-upped my watching. But him being a player described as, not the super athletic guy, but he'll do what he needs to do as a one tech, and it probably isn't going to be a big splash play dude, but is just is a body that can come in and play for you and shoot gaps. I'm like, I saw the opposite. I saw him as somebody who, like again against Cal, he was smoking that right tackle and right guard. Like he was getting out of his stance, firing out, and making dudes look stupid with how athletic he was as a pass rusher. But then in run defense, he was facing the wrong direction, acting as a fullback for the running back more times than he was making the right play. And some of the other games like that were similar, where like he's running himself out of gaps and he's showing twitch and getting ability to get out of stance for a guy who's 310. But at the same time, I'm like, you gotta tame the stallion here. You gotta tame the horse. And then I'm hearing other reports are like, no, he's pretty much like, you know what you're getting. He'll come in, do this, and that, and then you're not getting much past that. And I saw the total opposite. So there's a lot of guys, the way we did it this cycle, that I think I would need to go back and rewatch, especially the ones we did early on, just like another game or two, just to remind myself what I saw and see if they progressed any further past when we first watched them. But like I did that with a guy like Tonka Hemingway because again, no one was talking about him, so I rewatched him before I did my guys video just to make sure I wasn't talking, blowing smoke when there wasn't any fire there. And no, he was still a stud. Like I get it. He's 280. Like he's not going to be everyone's cup of tea at D tackle. And and not only is he 280, he played half the season with an arm cast. So not only is he already struggling with holding up in strength and stack and shedding, but he physically can't sometimes because he has a club on his other hand. But as someone who can shoot gaps, has IQ of a pass rusher, has some of the most bendable, flexible hips I've ever seen in a bigger guy like a D tackle, to be able to flatten he can shoot. Oftentimes he'd shoot upfield against the run play, be in the backfield when the ball's being handed off, and even though the ball's being run away from him, he was able to stop, bend, and flatten the angle and make a play behind the line of scrimmage, despite not being a traditionally good run defender. He made splash plays against the run and was a good pass rusher. So for someone who is that size with that level of athletic profile, who can also be an impact pass rusher for you as a rotational guy immediately, the fact that he's not like Omar Norman against the running game. Sure, he's not. I wouldn't describe him as a good run defender, but he's not that. I thought he was being slept on a ton, and I still do. But interesting enough, we got one of our guys we were covering here in Darian Porter going off the board to the Raiders. That's such a Raiders pick, too. Like, get the athlete, height, weight, speed, bank on traits. That's an Al Davis pick if I've ever seen one. Except Al Davis probably makes that in the first round.
So the Patriots, their pick came in pretty quickly. Have they drafted a receiver yet? Is this Noel?
I don't believe they've drafted a receiver yet because they
went running back. They went Henderson earlier, right?
Yeah. Oh my God. My voice is starting to go now.
Is there? I think all of the day 2 tight ends that I would have projected are off the board. So this would either be a defensive player or a wide receiver, I think.
I'm trying to think of what position defensively they'd go here. Potentially safety.
They need defensive line.
I could see also with as much conversations we've had, because they were when they were at 4, the idea was they were happy to take one of Carter or Hunter to pair, because like they have Jack Jones as the slot corner / safety hybrid. They have Christian Gonzalez. You could take another corner here to pair with Gonzalez on the outside and have a tandem of lockdown corners. You have some pieces on the D line, like Christian Barmore, who's always hurt. Keon White, athletic freak, but really hasn't done much production-wise. So you have some guys there, but you can complement them with more of a true edge rusher. And there's the pick, Kyle Williams. Someone I think comps very well to like a prime Stephon Diggs, skill set wise. Not saying he's going to be as good of it as him when he was at his peak, but a player that between route running, winning and route running, and the short to intermediate, and having some juice to get deep, that's seemingly the type of receiver that he wants. So Steph, because of his age and injury, he's probably going to be more of their slot specific. But I feel like Kyle Williams now is going to be the player that they think they're going to be getting Stephon Diggs if he was prime, and playing on that outside to complement what they have in like a Javon Baker. I'm still holding out hope for Jalen Polk. I was super high on him. Maybe my Washington bias got the best of me there, but
So, do you know that Kyle Williams is a high school quarterback?
I did hear that one, yeah, and that's one of the things that I thought would project into the Bills really highly, is because they love those players that didn't play the certain positions before going to college or switch positions in college, similar to Darian Porter.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not sure either of their picks so far have done that, though. I think Harrison and TJ Sanders have been through and through at their position.
Well, and there was, I guess, Cam Ward used to play at Washington State.
Yep.
There were a lot of people that like mocking Kyle Williams to the Titans just to reconnect the two Washington State players.
Yeah, and I liked Cam Ward a lot when he was at Washington State. That's where I first, like, his first year at Washington State was when I first got eyes on him. And he was like around, I had him graded similarly then to what I had Shedeur graded this year. He was still on the board, mind you. So I was super high on Cam Ward when it came to that. And he's only gotten better since going to Miami. I don't think I think it's a little overvalued when they link players who were college teammates back up, especially a quarterback, wide receiver. A lot of times it's a totally different system. Like, yeah, the chemistry's there, sure, but I don't put a ton of stock in there.
Okay, there was a fan that just asked Roger Goodell for his autograph. Like, if you could get an autograph from a personality, would it be the commissioner of the NFL?
No.
No.
Of a personality, he doesn't have a personality. Also, this is this total. I got a couple opinions on this Detroit Lions pick here.
Tesla.
So I'm mad because if the Bills took them 2 picks later, I would have been jumping for joy. But also, the fact the Lions chose Tesla over Ayumanner is surprising to me. Because they're both guys that
Anderson play for Buffalo.
Potentially. When I watched Ayumanner, he came off to me as a player that when I was watching, I was getting angry because I liked him so much. But he won in the same way that Keon Coleman does, and how I think that you would want Keon Coleman to win. And comparing his tape to Keon Coleman's Florida State tape, he's just a better version of Keon Coleman. I liked everything about him. And the fact that the Bills have Keon Coleman makes me believe that they're not going to take him. Maybe as, like, again, a Matt Collins replacement, who could be like a jump ball guy, and he'd, like, run blocks his ass off. I thought he was perfect for the Lions to take over that Tim Patrick role. Apparently, they liked Isaac Tesla a little bit more. They're both phenomenal run blockers. They have speed down the field. They excel because they both have size and can win in jump ball situations. So I'm surprised that Tesla went first than Ayumanner. I have Ayumanner graded significantly higher, especially for the Lions. I guess the Lions make sense for Tesla since I was mocking them to Ayumanner so often. I felt like Tesla was the next best option if you were looking for an Ayumanner clone.
Okay, so handicapping the Bills pick here. What's coming to my mind is Landon Jackson, Princely, Xavier Watts, Pooh Paul, Ty Felton. Anybody else that you're thinking comes to mind here for the Bills pick that's coming up? And
I think you could have stopped at Landon Jackson. We'd be safe with that. I cannot imagine it's anybody other than Landon Jackson, especially to the fact he's here at 72. We were talking about Landon Jackson at 30.
yes.
which would have been a reach for me personally. Not that big of a reach. If Landon Jackson here is a steal,
But isn't there a medical on him?
is there? I didn't hear anything about that.
I
Let's see.
think he missed time last year. It may have not been this year, but he missed some time with an injury.
It was a neck injury. Carted off the field. And that was against Missouri. I feel like he came back and played, though. I can fact check that one. Yeah, so apparently he had a scary neck injury against Missouri, which I did watch that Missouri game. He was, Armand Membu locked down everybody, but I think he was doing a pretty good job of it against Membu. And no, it's a Missouri game ended his season. It was week 14. And he had that neck injury and it ended the season. So that could be why he's fallen. How many picks do we have left here to go? Quite a few.
We're at the
102.
beginning of round 3. So
Yeah.
I
just didn't know how many.
We have about 25 to go.
Yeah, it goes to 102. I was trying to see what the last pick was. Because now I'm with the Bills up in 2 picks. I'm debating calling the stream after the Bills' second pick. If we miss it straight up, and that is what it is. But yeah, the lights are very hot and it's catching up to me a little bit. So we'll see how I can last. So Saints so far have gone Kelvin Banks, Tyler Shuck.
They need a receiver and they need a corner.
They need an everything.
This to me feels like Savone Ravel. Because they just traded Lattimore, so they're down a corner.
Yeah, I had predicted them taking Jahdae Barron at 9. Wrong Texas player. I was so close to hitting so many different picks in that mock draftable. Or not mock draftable, the whatever
I found it funny that Bill was the one at the bottom. And I was higher than Chris Collins. Those are the 2 things, right?
I'm not surprised by either of those. Was Phil Simms in there as well?
I did not see if Phil Simms was.
Because I know he usually has some wild takes when it comes to the draft. All right, Vernon Broughton, Texas D tackle. I don't think he would have been the Bills' pick here anyway. I know they showed some interest, but I don't think that would have been their pick. All right, so the Bills are on the. Is there any possibility this is a trade down spot?
If you can trade down and start moving some of those 6th round picks up, I definitely would. Like try to get the 6th round picks into round 5. But I don't know that you give up Landon Jackson to pull off that maneuver. If you think Landon Jackson can be a productive player, or Princely can be a productive player, I think that those should be the 2 highest players. But it also wouldn't shock me if this is Pooh Paul.
So we went down a list of players that we thought would be the pick here for the Bills. I wouldn't be surprised if this is a move down just because they also view it the same way, where like they can land X amount of players and they move down another 10, 15 spots because they know one of those guys is going to be there.
Yeah, so Lee Evans is the one announcing this pick.
All right, there it is.
Landon Jackson. I like it. This is turning out. I like the draft for Buffalo. It's the same 3 positions that nearly every mock draft had. We just didn't pick the players in the spots that we thought we would.
Yeah, I like what just got sent in our little Bills group chat. Landon Jackson is AJ Epinesa plus for me. Like he's he's a guy that has the size and the length and the power, but I feel like he's a bit better of an athlete than a guy like Epinesa was. Epinesa also had to find his correct playing weight, was utilized in a weird way at Iowa. I think Landon Jackson projects much more cleanly to the Bills' front. And now you don't have to worry about scrambling to replace some Epinesa next season when he walks. I think this pick spells, if it's not for a cheap contract, it spells the end of AJ Epinesa's time in Buffalo.
Now, do you think that that's the end of his time, as in Epinesa doesn't make it out of camp?
No, I think he'll play one more season because I'm again with the neck injury we were just talking about. Maybe they play it slow with Landon Jackson if maybe he's not healthy this season. Also, because Hoyt is on suspension, I don't think they'd be willing to cut a guy for like as an Epinesa. I think what you're much likely more to see is have him ride out the rest of the season, have Jackson slowly ramp up into eating into his snaps, and by the end of this season, Epinesa and Jackson are at similar roles when it comes to snap share and how much effect they have on the defense. I think he's going to get a lot more playing time than a guy like Javon Solomon did last season. And then after that, you let him walk unless he takes like a significant pay cut. And then, so yeah, we're probably going to call the stream here. But the last pick we see before we go is the Jets taking Azariah Thomas. Good pick for them, especially the pair with Sauce. Got two long, athletic corners, so it's a good pick for the Jets. But all right, I am suffering, so we're going to call it here. Bills end up now Maxwell Harrison round 1, and then they get TJ Sanders and Landon Jackson on day 2. I'm happy with it. I think if the Bills internally take Landon Jackson, or not Landon Jackson, Dwayne Carter could be the one tech, and then maybe they double dip and they grab a Jordan Phillips or a Joshua Farmer, even in the 4th round. You could sell me on that this was the perfect draft for them. But we'll see how the rest of the picks go. I wouldn't put it past them to trade back up into the 3rd with the abundance of day 3 picks they do have. So keep an eye on that. Don't walk away from the draft right now. But for now, for me and Jim, thank you for joining me. Sam, if you're somewhere in the ether, you're listening back to this, thank you for joining us earlier. And we're gonna wrap this up and end the stream. So thank you guys for coming. We had a good spread of viewers. So thank you guys.
Thanks, Owen.
No problem.